and goes, "We'll sell you the whole seat, but you're only going to need the edge because you're fat and sitting all the way back in the seat fucking hurts. And now your fat ass is leaning on a stranger, even though you've kept your hands in your lap the whole time, trying not to take up so much room. So have another hot dog or three, fatso." Oh my gosh, that is the best "sell me a seat to a monster truck show" promo ever.
Dick drops the hammer. It looks like he's coming on him, Richard.
Oh,
That's
hey,
really good.
You're back. Bottom dead center. Here we are, episode 3, season 2. Oh, you happened to just stumble upon and walk in on Matt Looker and I laughing pretty hardly at some pretty humorous remarks from earlier today by our good buddy Justin Mosinger, the OSMT archivist. But so we had a full lineup of hosts for you tonight. They all fucking quit and had tech errors, so now you're stuck with Matt and I. So Matt's drunk on his recently consumed breakfast this evening, and I'm drunk on non-alcoholic Arnold Palmer. So neither of us are drunk, but we've been fighting through tech issues, and we've lost all sanity. Isn't that right, Looker?
Yeah, sanity probably.
Oh, Christ's sakes, are you locked up?
No,
You were
I'm
locked
here.
up for a second. That was perfect.
Great. That was perfect timing. Yeah, I think sanity left about a half hour ago.
Yeah, definitely left about a half hour ago. I don't even know where to start this damn show, but here we are. We were supposed to have Frank on. He's at the Holman Racing Compound in Ohio, is our understanding. They have recently renewed their supply of local internets, so they should have connectivity. Frank is having troubles, but we suspect because he has a flip phone and a life alert thing on his neck, he might have pressed the life alert button trying to join several times instead of using his phone. And the ambulances are now completing their 9th round trip to the Holman compound to find no one there needing life alert services. So good job on that ambulance bill, Frank. No, it's good to be back. Been a couple weeks off for us. We're trying to stick to a pretty standard routine here. And as you know, we all have crazy schedules and our own lives going. And until somebody wants to pay us a livable wage to host Bottom Dead Center, it's just going to be this way. So anyways, I'm hanging out in the OSMT archival dungeon here, if you will, back home in Cheyenne. Looker, you look like you're hanging out at home in New York right now, but I want to catch up and see what you've been up to the last couple of weeks. And I heard you might have done some marrying recently.
Yeah, a little crossover episode between personal life stuff and Monster Truck World. Officiated my first wedding for a guy we all know as Opie, Nate Kirchner, him and his now wife, Krista. I got them married in Wisconsin this past weekend, so that was a good time. Shout out to them. They're on their honeymoon right now, having a good time. So yeah, that was something new for me.
So how the heck do you become licensed to officiate weddings? What is? I know there was no righteous path to any sort of priesthood for you, so tell us, what mail-in service did you use to become licensed, registered, whatever it takes to do that?
I feel slighted that you assumed that I was not brought up in the seminary. No, you have about, I think it was $65. Have $65 to your name on some sort of credit card. You spend about 30 seconds online, and you too can be a minister.
Hashtag instant clergy. Just add cash. So you could choose like which deity you.
Yeah.
So you can choose what deity you want. Like you could be like a father or a rabbi or an imam, or how does that work?
Well, no, you choose like what church you want to go through. So I could have gone through the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster if I wanted to. So just things like that.
Oh, that would have been metal. Myself, let's see, we released an OSMT Prime, our first OSMT Prime in quite a while last week. Just a short but sweet, fun little Firestone Tires promotional video from 1993 featuring Jim Kramer and Bigfoot 9. So that was kind of neato. And Looker, did you get to see that at all? Like any of that stuff of Kramer bombing around out in the wilds of Utah?
Yeah, I caught a little bit of it. that's cool footage. I mean, Kramer was not out of the seat yet, but he was certainly not their top drivers, one of their top drivers at the time. So it's kind of cool seeing what would have almost been a throwback.
We joke about connections. We're on our 19th attempt of recording this fucking show tonight. Shout out not to Riverside FM. Riverside FM's going in the bag from Dick's tonight instead of the the guy on eBay trying to scalp Dan Runny hero cards. But more on that later. That's impressive as hell to me that you can become an ordained minister so quickly. Also, I'll keep my opinions on that topic limited and just say I guess I'm also not surprised. So no background check was required on Matt Looker before making him an ordained minister. All right. Well, nice. I did some ministering of my own, I guess you would say, over this past weekend. I was administering the disposal of multiple liters of delicious Oktoberfest beer with my family and friends at Prost Brewing Company in Denver. We went down there for their annual Oktoberfest celebration. Their massive, like 40,000 square foot beer garden and beer hall in North Glen, just north of Denver. Shout out to some of my Monster Jam buddies that have raced in Denver over the years, and had the good fortune of getting drugged to this location by yours truly for a good evening out. But we had a great time. Big beers, big pretzels, big other things, big music. Baby goats showed up randomly. I don't know if I don't remember seeing it on the schedule, but goats are, you know, an iconic part of German beer culture. So literally like a little, I don't know, do you call them a flock, a herd, a back seat full of baby goats arrived? I and my best friend Eric had enough beers on board that I was just not even like surprised. I was like, yeah, there's goats out in the beer garden. All right, this is great. So no, we had a really good time down there. You know, so shout out to my wife, Robin, for putting up with all of our, it's just everything. You know what I mean? Like, you think I talk too much on this show. Wait till you get my buddy and I put us together with some beers and get us started talking about music and shit like that. It's a good thing no one asked me to record this show live from Prost Brewing last Saturday. We'll put it that way. I got to tell you, though, Matt, in all the years I've stayed in hotels on the road, you know, particularly for my monster truck career and things like that, I had a new one happen at the hotel to us Friday night. So we went down to Denver a day early, took off Friday, and, you know, we had full intention of closing down the hotel bar Friday night, and we did. Not in the way we expected. We had got there, and first thing we did, unload the kids into the room, get them changed, and head to the pool and the hot tub. So I'm having a ice cold Coors Banquet, chilling in the hot tub, having a good time. The kids are playing, did some swimming with them, go back up to the room, and everybody's had their lap through the shower to get the chlorine water off, get dressed to head downstairs. And I'm just finishing up in the shower, and the overhead light in the bathroom just goes darkness. And I've never seen a light in a hotel bathroom just sort of dim out like that. It wasn't like off. It was just a dim out. And I was like, what in the hell? And I was staying at a nice hotel, and I was like, no, this isn't one of those shit Super 8s I used to stay in that had like the dial on the wall, you know, for the heat lamp above you. So it hadn't like ding, expired and like killed my lights. I'm like, what the hell? So I'm trying to get out of the shower, and then my, you know, wife comes in, opening the door, and about bonks me in the head. And she's like, all the power's out. And I'm like, oh shit. So, you know, got dried off, got dressed in the dark and everything, and look out the window, and like lights are off everywhere. It's just like emergency lights as far as we can see where we were staying at. And that was right when, you know, my friend and his significant other and her best friend had showed up to the hotel. So even our phones weren't texting properly. So like everything was down. So we went down in the lobby, found them, and I had a sizable cooler on my shoulder full of additional Coors Banquets. And so we just posted up in the hotel bar, which had no way to ring up drinks for us because the power was down. And the bartender there was so cool. He let us just drink our own beers, brought us like some chips and salsa to snack on. And as soon as the power came back on, my guy was super cool, hurried up and got like the ovens and shit running again so the kids could eat some dinner, and didn't break a sweat at all that we had just knocked down a 12-pack of Coors Banquet in his bar and didn't try and charge us for anything. Like, very, very good staff at this hotel. I don't get paid to drop hotel names, so unfortunately this hotel chain shall remain unnamed. I wish the name of the hotel involved 2 trees, as Mitch Hedberg would say, but that joke doesn't work here because it wasn't that hotel. So yeah, that was a pretty interesting Friday night. And then, like I said, we kicked it at Oktoberfest on Saturday. And then we made the trek back home on Sunday just in time for the Cup playoff race at the Roval. And I don't know about where you are, Looker. I don't know if you have a sprinkler system at your house. I've got one at my house. And we started barely touching freezing overnight temperatures here in Wyoming this week. So I had to blow my damn sprinklers out on Sunday. So this is the compelling monster truck talk that you come thirstily to Bottom Dead Center for every week. But as we told you, we're kind of just regular dudes trying to get through life. So, all right. So we have some news, weather, and sports coming up for you right now, and some things that we're going to wait till we can get Frank on that we want to touch on. We know he had some words on Dan Runney that he wanted to share. And kind of wanted an update from him on how his Hot Wheels tour is going, but also talk about some of these Hot Wheels international events that are happening in these big stadiums, like soccer stadiums, football stadiums with dirt. Those actually look pretty fun. But anyways, we'll get to some non-monster related stuff I wanted to touch on as well. But really this has been a year. So the first thing I wanted to touch on was the passing, unfortunately, this week of a very, very long time Bigfoot employee that had moved on to a career in, the drag racing side of the motorsports industry over the last, decade or so. But his name was John Peterson. And, people that met John, have no doubt, great memories of John. He was a pretty quiet and an unassuming guy when he would go on the road with the Bigfoot operation. And typically you wouldn't see John unless it was like a pretty special deal, a pretty big event, like a 4-wheel jamboree or a Pro MT or a Penda show back in the day or things like that. And I wish I had a list of some of John's accolades that I could read off to you, but I can tell you, so like I talked to Jim Kramer earlier today. I, asked him to phone me up because I just want to see how he was doing, because I know he was close to Dan and we hadn't talked, quite since Dan had passed away, and he was close to John. And, I know the last, several weeks have been real hard on Jim. They've been hard on a lot of people at the Bigfoot organization. Jim and John Peterson, they worked so hand in hand together for a long time at that team. I mean, Kramer was pretty good with motor stuff, pretty good with transmission stuff, but John was just like next level. And then they developed, when Bigfoot started refining their in-house shock program, kind of at the end of the 90s. I mean, those two worked so hand in hand on so much of that stuff. Jim was telling me a funny story today. They were doing a Pro MT event, and Dan was struggling to get as much power out of the motor as really what he wanted. And Jim and John were discussing back and forth about, changing some of this, changing some of that. And Kramer was just dead set. He's telling me that, let's change the blower out. Let's put a different blower on, and we'll fatten the fuel system up a little bit, and we'll see what that does for him. And John's like, man, that blower we got on the truck's a really good blower. Are you sure you want to do that? And he's like, no, Kramer said, it's my call. Let's give it a shot. We'll see what happens. And so they swapped blowers, and on the first pass down through there, Dan, basically burned up a piston in the motor. And he just kind of looked at John. He's like, well, you were right, John. And John wasn't smug about it at all. John was just, he cared so much. He was just heartbroken that, the truck was broken. He was ready to dive right in and do whatever it takes, or whatever it took to fix it. But I'm wildly underselling, John's contributions to the team. But another point that Jim and I kind of arrived at together is, people, and I've made comments like this, and I think they could get misconstrued sometimes, but there was not a preferential treatment that I ever saw among drivers at Bigfoot. There was certainly a pecking order, and that's different. So the pecking order is an earned meritocracy, let's say. So obviously Dan or Larry are going to get the latest and greatest of everything that the team has to offer, because for the most part, those guys are carrying they're doing the latest and greatest style shows out there. It doesn't mean that like myself or Darren or somebody was getting bad parts or not good parts. We weren't maybe just getting the super primo stuff, because that's just kind of how it works. But somebody like John, and certainly there's other guys working in the shop that were busting their asses too, Brian and all those guys. But what I'm saying about John is John might not be able to give you as badass of a blower on your motors what Dan's got on his. John might not be able to put the fanciest, latest and greatest shock idea on your truck that, him and the guys maybe had on Dan's truck. But what John would do is make sure you went out with as safe and clean and reliable as a Bigfoot truck as he could possibly put together for you or anyone else. So while, let's say when I was driving 10 and Dan's driving 16 or 18 or whatever, he certainly has on paper and on track a superior truck with a superior driver. But the truck I was driving was just as fair to hand to a driver of my skill level as what Dan was getting at his. And John was just one of those moving forces. He would stay and thrash on stuff and work on stuff and tighten every last bolt and tune every last injector just the same as he would on anybody's truck. He was very, very even keeled and egalitarian like that. So, he left Bigfoot towards the end of the 20-teens, right around the time that Dan Runney had stopped driving full-time, and made his way out to North Carolina. So when monster trucks used to race in Aruba pretty regularly, I believe his name was Van Eman, E-M-A-N, I think is how you spell the last name, the Eman family. And they actually had a pro stock operation that they raced here in the States a lot. And so the Emons were a big part of getting the monster truck events out to Aruba, but they also had their, racing roots here in the States as well. And John was an extremely passionate fan and participant in drag racing outside of monster trucks. So, John was involved with that team for a period of time. I believe he even went to work for one of the clutch manufacturers that made clutches for, different drag racing applications and things like that. So, we lost John, like I said, earlier this week. Actually, it was over the weekend, truthfully. And, we're recording this on Wednesday, 10/8. So we're a few days in after the fact that this has happened, but, just incredibly sad, man. The Bigfoot family's had a tough go. A lot of people like Jim, super close to John over the years. And, what can I say, man, our hearts go out to him. John leaves his wife, Julie, behind, and, what a couple of sweet souls they were, pretty unassuming people, just super mild mannered, good hearted people. And, kind of sad John's not around, but I can tell you some of the baddest ass runs that Dan Runty has ever made in a monster truck. There was some John Peterson magic sprinkled on those trucks before those runs happened. So, shout out to John Peterson there. So, Matt, as we're moving along through the news, weather, and sports section here, wanted to talk about the 2025 Hall of Fame inductees and landmark award winners that were announced, and I kind of want to start with you and get your thoughts on that. But how about it? Our guy, Ron Bachman, Lurch, first ballot Hall of Famer, I understand. Now, it was a battle getting him to the ballot finally, but we had our OSMT Bachman Old Acre 25 campaign rolling, and I don't know how much we actually helped, but it looks like we got one of our picks into the Hall of Fame. But yeah, so Ron Bachman, Steve Dane, of course, Mr. Excitement, Jim Kohler, friend of the show. We got to talk about him. And of course, Larry Birch. And then, gosh dang it, who am I forgetting on the last side here? Oh, of course, Daryl Starbird. So, yeah, I'll let you take it away for a minute, Matt, but kind of skim over those guys a little bit and tell us what you think of this year's class of inductees. You are on mute, my friend.
You are correct about that. Sorry about that.
Unmuted, set free. Here goes Matt Looker with his hot takes. All right, tell us. Thoughts on the Hall class.
Just wanted to make sure we had as much technical difficulties this episode as possible. Anyways, so I wanted to kind of continue with a guy like in the background, like John Peterson, like you were saying, Larry Birch, if you're not in the industry, you probably aren't aware of his contribution with the RII. And he did run Devil's Dodge, so you probably know his name from that, but definitely deserving of some accolades for his RII work. And then moving on to Ron Bachman, first ballot, but I can tell you for a lot of years he's been on the nominating list, and for whatever reason didn't make it through. I'm glad he finally made it through. I think we've talked about him on this program before. An ambassador, a driver, maybe not a Dan Runte caliber driver, but his other work with Bigfoot throughout the years makes him certainly more than deserving of a Hall of Fame spot. Lurch, as everybody called him, just a great guy that you'd want to have at an event, whatever the capacity he was at. And really helped bring monster trucks to other parts of the world when he would go. Like I said, we call him the ambassador. He was somebody that you wanted representing monster trucks in a new spot, I think is what it comes down to it. And then Jim Kohler, also first ballot Hall of Famer. Their team does so much. It's like a one-stop shop for their team. They build everything in-house. They fabricate everything. They run as hard as anybody, and a 4-truck team for so long. And one of the things, he's one of the few drivers where, the Feld Monster Jam trucks, they're not, I guess you don't want to say they're given a completely unlimited budget, because that's honestly not fair to say. But if you were to take a driver and put them in a Feld truck, and let's say the truck may not be able to survive the driver, it would be Jim Kohler. He builds the strongest trucks in the industry that can survive just whatever they throw at it with minimal breakage most weekends. And to do that week in and week out for so many years is just a testament to him and his crew, the people he surrounds himself with. He's a great guy. I always love talking to him, love having him at shows. He's definitely worthy of being in the Hall of Fame as well. So I think this was a good group. And then, of course, Mr. Dane of the Awesome / King Kong group back in the day. One of the pioneers. So yeah, this was a good group, I feel like.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We certainly made our case for Ron Bachman on here. Plenty of times we've talked about Ron. And we've talked about Oldacre some. We'll talk about him, in the future as we try and push through another election cycle with the Hall. And then, you can't argue with Steve Dane. I guess kind of shame on me, but I thought for some reason, like after Jeff, he was in not too long after that. But, what I did think was kind of cool is like Steve Dane and Jim Kohler are sort of like generational iconic talents, but also just sort of like iconic independence, across their respective time frames. They ran and run some seriously tough trucks, big power trucks, hard chargers, do whatever it takes to please the fans and to get the job done type operations. And certainly Kohler's operation, as we documented in season 1 when we had him on as a guest, has evolved into a pretty impressively refined operation, compared to what they used to have. So, they've just sort of taken a torch like the one the Danes lit and just kind of run with it, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And honestly, that's a good parallel. Driving talent and just being able to run an independent team up and down the road every week. That's a real good point. It takes not only a driving talent and a work ethic, but just kind of being an innovator, being able to see where the industry is going to go, not necessarily with every technological advancement, but being able to just be at the forefront of the industry as you're competing and winning. I think that's what it takes to be a Hall of Fame independent monster trucker.
No, I agree. And so, like I said, I was, super happy to see those guys on the list with Big Ron. I mean, Ron, obviously one of the greatest ambassadors the sport, has ever had, will ever have, full stop. And then as far as the landmark award recipients go, I mean, if you've been around trucks for any period of time, you've definitely dealt with, Birch RII equipment. I mean, that's what we had and all the Hall Brothers stuff that I drove, and definitely remember, getting to meet Larry and some of his crew, back in the day. And of course, they ran the Devil's Dodge monster truck in the 90s for a while too. So they've certainly been, an important part of the sport. I mean, Matt Stoltz wrote a really nice, submission to the Hall for, considering Larry for the Landmark Award, and, pointing out things like a multi-channel receiver in the truck and the receiver being designed to be integrated into the truck's wiring system rather than being like a holstered device that had to be, like, you watch the TNT runs, from the 1990s, especially when there was some RII controversy. We'll get to it later, but like the Freedom Hall stuff, having to change the, radios in and out of the trucks, hand your radio in as you're pulling off the floor type stuff. And that's not great either, right? Like, now you've got a monster truck that's the closest it's going to be all night, theoretically, to people out in the pits and things like that. And it's got no kill radio on board. So if a throttle was to stick, or God forbid something happened, there's no way to kill it. So the Birch radio system, back in the day, being designed to just be kept and left in the truck, and with a right, center, and left lane channel is pretty awesome. So great suggestion, and a great choice by the Hall there. And then, of course, Daryl Starbird, I mean, legendary, car customizer, car show promoter, a very early buyer into the monster truck industry, with his Starbird car shows, and of course, his son Cliff with Monster Vet and Frankenstein, and later Wild Sting. They incorporated monster truck car crushing performances very early on into their shows, and they featured, Old Acre with Rolling Thunder, and there was Kong trucks, and there was a Bigfoot truck from time to time, and just different trucks that they brought to their shows. And of course, if you're familiar with the, Battle of the Monster Trucks home video, that Oklahoma City show with trucks racing side by side over cars. I mean, yeah, it might have only been 4 trucks and not super fast racing, but I mean, you kind of have to argue that that really could be considered the first side by side monster truck racing in history, even more so than the Return of the Monster Trucks event at the Superdome that happened sometime after that. So, excellent recipients, I think, for the Landmark Awards. So, good job to the International Monster Truck Hall of Fame and Museum on that. That's pretty awesome there. Cruising right along. Let's see. We saw our buddy Cody Saucier. He stopped in on the last episode to talk a little Dan Runny with us as much as he was able to. He was in Mexico City here over this most recent weekend competing for Monster Jam. Nearly 7,000 feet of altitude, roughly, where they were competing at. So, of course, the trucks were dogs. You just can't make a lot of power, no matter what you do at that altitude. And it was pretty cool. I don't know if you saw, Looker. I'll try and... I'll try and drop a screenshot in here. I didn't think to save it earlier, but Cody had a really cool Jesse Berge reference, because we're always joking about how Jesse did so much with so little. His motors didn't make a ton of power. They usually weren't supercharged. And he said he felt like Jesse Berge driving around out there, but was able to bring some win home. So congrats and good job to Cody on that. Sounds like he might have 1 or 2 more shows yet before the year's over, and then he is done until first quarter, and we'll see what happens then. Looker, a couple more shout outs. Our friends, the Zimmers with Send It Motorsports. I saw they were hiring. Did you catch a look at that?
I did, yeah. With Brett Falvey leaving the team, on good terms, of course, but, well, I shouldn't say of course. He's leaving to spend some more time home. They would love to find a CDL holding monster truck, adjacent person. If you have a CDL and you wanted to work on monster trucks, get a hold of them. That is a great group to work with. So yeah, like you're saying, they got a big busy first quarter coming up. Would be a good team to be involved with for sure.
I would volunteer myself to apply for that job, but I'm still tired of working on these things. I don't want to work on nothing, but I'll drive the rig everywhere they want me to, and then I'll just hang out and check out cool cities as we go show to show. But I have the succinct feeling that is not what John Zimmer is looking for, and as hard and as well as their trucks run, they don't want somebody not working on the trucks, I think. So scratch that idea for me. Have to find another way to get paid to travel for fun. And lastly, you might have seen on Facebook, if you follow Hall Brothers Racing, their page several weeks ago was very clearly hacked by somebody, and there was just rubbish content being posted for the longest time. And then there was some, some pretty, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, rude or distasteful or off-color memes from old monster truck pages being posted on there. It's very obviously not the Hall Brothers team. So they've got a new Facebook page, so you're going to want to go on Facebook and check them out. Look for the new Hall Brothers Racing Monster Trucks page on Facebook and get back to staying caught up with what Raminator, and man, I'm going to mess it up every time. I almost said Ramunition. It's now Ramdemption, which is still hard for me to pronounce. I feel like I still want to just call it Ramunition, and I'm still confused. Like Raminator's red, Ramunition's black and yellow, and they swapped everything around on me, and I'm struggling with that. But anyways, get through that section there, and we're on to a little non-monster truck related pieces of news. I'm going to wait to talk about David Malukas finally getting the green light, moving over to Team Penske and IndyCar, because I know that's a big topic for Frank. He's going to want to talk about. But Matt, a couple things that jumped out to me. Of course, we just finished up the round of 12 in the NASCAR playoffs this past weekend in Charlotte on the Roval. Controversy and chaos abound yet again. But we're into the round of 8, and we've got 3 races ahead of us to decide who's going to be racing in Phoenix. But I know you're not as avid of a NASCAR fan as I am, Matt, but did you happen to see some of the so there was that tight kind of battle going back and forth throughout the end of the race of where was Joey Logano going to finish? Where was Ross Chastain going to finish? Chastain needed to be so many spots ahead of Logano to transfer to the round of 8, whereas Logano needed to make up as many spots as he could on Chastain to a certain point to at least get to where his tiebreaker, would get him into the round of 8. And ultimately, won't go into too much detail on some of the controversy, but Chastain ends up just absolutely obliterating Denny Hamlin in the final chicane, takes himself out, which was not his initial intent. But credit to the man, he grabbed reverse really fast and did a pretty kick-ass, reverse burnout over the finish line to try and save his season against Logano, which ended up not working. But did you see the video of that, dude? Like, I was watching it live and I about came out of the chair like, what? It's another Chastain Hail Melon move.
Yeah, I did see the video of it after the fact. I didn't get to watch it live, but it's one of those racing moments where you're like, what's going on there? That's awesome. Something out of a video game almost, I guess you want to say.
Finishing in reverse.
Yeah. Yep. It was a good ending to that race, and I think for all of there's a lot of, I don't want to say controversy, but not a lot of great feelings from some people about having like the round of 12, the round of 8, as opposed to just doing a normal season like is done in every other circle track or what NASCAR used to be. But sometimes you do really get those intense moments because a driver needs to place a certain spot in these races to move on. And they're going to do things like that, where if it was just a normal point series, well, they'll just finish the race and try to make up some points next week. That's not the case. What's going to happen here? They need to finish further up than what they're at, and they're going to pull out a Hail Mary move like Chastain did.
Well, Chastain is the resident video game move creator in NASCAR right now. Is his original Hail Melon around 3 and 4 at Martinsville in what was that, 2023 to transfer to the Final Four in Phoenix was obviously outlawed like the day after that. But I mean, the Hail Melon was like the biggest news in auto racing for weeks on end. And unfortunately, his move against Hamlin now, I say unfortunately, I mean, it was very fortunate for Logano, who's one of the drivers I want to see advance, and I'll take the hate for that. I don't care. But it was the fail melon this time, I saw somebody say, which, we love a good dad joke pun on here. The playoff system sounds like it's going to receive some kind of significant overhaul for next season, and I think it's probably about time for that. They're going to change to Miami Homestead will be the host for the final race, at least for next year. They may rotate around, which tracks are able to host, the finals of each year. I love the idea of having a couple cutoff rounds to shrink the playoffs down, and then having like a 4-race sort of like mini chase, to see who's able to wrap it up. And that way, I mean, TV wants to manufacture storylines and drama and things like that. And I think it could be safe to say that in today's era of NASCAR, having so much off the shelf assembled, spec park car parity at times, and also just the horrible, like dirty air that this current, car puts off can make racing pretty shitty sometimes out there. So I don't think the one race, battle to the champion, with 4 cars is really the right way to do it. It's certainly not the perfect way. I think a mini chase could be really cool. I kind of like aspects of the playoffs. I think it's kind of interesting and unique to have something so different for NASCAR versus kind of what everybody else does. And I mean, I still love IndyCar, and I watched every IndyCar race this year, but it wasn't as exciting at the end. I mean, I was more excited at the end of the IndyCar season just to see if Joseph Newgarden was going to be able to win a race or if he's going to get shut out for the season. But Alex Palou had been crowned champ like 3 races before that. So, I kind of like the idea of overhauling it, but still sticking to some kind of playoff format. Somebody was arguing with me the other day. They're like, Logano's a hack. He's only won his 3 championships, under these messed up playoff formats and all that stuff. And I was like, well, you got to call Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson hacks too, and Ryan Blaney, because they've won their championships under this format. I'm pretty sure Jimmy Johnson might have won at least, 1 or more under this format. Kyle Busch, so all it is you can hate the game. You shouldn't hate the player. That's what I say. I mean, yeah, you can hate the driver if you don't like him. I'm just saying, don't blame them for doing what they have to do, to win in the format that's provided for them. I see some people, boy, I'm on a soapbox now. I see some people trying to do like, and we do this in monster trucks too. Like there's some record keeping fans out there that try and present like an industry wide, points chase through the year to try and like collate all this data and race finishes. And I admire their efforts to try and do that. And so there's fans in NASCAR that do that with like a mock. If this was the Winston Cup, this is where the points would stand right now. But that's pretty much irrelevant to me. I mean, and nobody's racing the NASCAR schedule as though it was a 36 race schedule right now. They're all trying to game the system to hurry up and win a race, get locked into the playoffs, build up playoff points, and then run the table through the playoffs. So trying to tell me what the points look like in a 36 race Winston Cup format is useless right now because nobody's trying to play that game. I mean, you're trying to score a soccer game like it's, a American football game. So is what it is. I'm off that soapbox now though. And as I step down from it, Matt, I'm going to just step right back up onto it with you here. And you know what? I think it's about time you introduced one of our fan favorite segments of the show. And that's where we take something that we don't necessarily agree with and we put it in a bag. So do the intro, Looker.
Well, I think there we go. There it is. Here it comes. I think one of the, in my opinion, most tasteless things you can do is to try to make a buck off somebody else's death. And what we saw here on eBay this week, I believe it was eBay, was someone taking a hero card that was signed by Dan Runte and posting it for almost $2,000. And I know me and you talked about this off camera, we're on camera, but off the podcast earlier. Autographs are not always worth a lot of money just because they have some sentimental value. Unless you're talking about like a Babe Ruth signed World Series ball. I know you made the comment about a David Pearson autographed piece a few $100s. Okay. Dan Runte, we've talked about how much of an icon he is and what he means to the sport. There is nothing about denigrating the price of a hero card that involves diminishing Dan's accomplishments, but to think that a hero card is worth almost $2,000 is just someone trying to make a buck, and honestly, shame on you.
Yep. Yeah, and the speed with which they ramp this auction up and they put RIP in the description and stuff like that. I mean, like, people's tears aren't even hardly dried. This wound isn't healed, for anybody that was close to Dan right now. And then you're trying to throw, and I didn't even get into the auction, so I don't know if there's any kind of authentication if it's even really Dan's autograph or not. So I'm just saying, allegedly, it is Dan Runney's autograph. It looks like it, but this is eBay, right? But $1,800, like, earmuffs, kids, fuck you, dude. And then I hear, like, recently he's dropped the price to like 500. Also, again, fuck you, dude. Like, so, 1,800 was too much. Well, I'll see if I can get him for 500. Like, disrespectful as hell. It's classless. I know it happens all the time, but you know what? This is our show, and Dan was important to all of us, and I know he was important to a lot of you out there. So, that's where the bag from Dick's came in hot and heavy this time, to not put a Dan Runney hero card in there, but to put this shitty purveyor, trying to just scald people with his insanely high pricing on this 8x10 on there. So yeah, you know what? I certainly have my share of autographed Dan Runty stuff, but I would feel bad going on eBay and even selling something like that. So, I know people have a job reselling and things like that, but yeah, fuck that. So anyways, sorry, not sorry for the coarse language, but that has been the return of our Bag from Dick's segment. Back again. We weren't expecting to have one, and then we saw, we had that brought to our attention by part of our OSMT archival crew. They hooked us up with screenshots on that, told us about that. So not super stoked on what that guy was doing, but hey, want to do a couple quick housekeeping notes and some shout outs. You want to head over to the online OSMT Mart merchandise store, the OSMT Mart. It's your source for all of the useless and silly and tongue-in-cheek and not as cool as what the real teams make merchandise, but we love it anyways. I'm rocking a prototype tonight, so don't at me, don't get mad at me. This is my prototype 4 Means War shirt here. If you know, you know. This was just a prototype design I did, mocked up. The new one's, a little more understated, let's say. But yeah, check that stuff out. It's monster truck gear for fans, by fans. It's an if you know type thing like that. And we just want to have some fun with it. All it does is help us offset a couple of the bucks we have to spend for, our recording platform, which tonight we really, really hate. Thumbs down, Riverside FM. We'll probably try another one again here soon. But, we spend, some money to be able to pull off the stuff that we do here for OSMT. So the OSMT Mart has some new designs up, including a bunch of stuff with 4 Means War on it right now. So if you're a previous fan of any of our stuff, that we like paying homage to very specific, trucks through, monster truck history, OSMT history. And, what can we say about old number 4 that hasn't already been said? But I'll tell you this, if that baby rolls out of the trailer, she means war when she showed up at a show back then. And we're going to get to talking about number 4 going to war a little bit during the second half of the show coming up here in a bit. I'm going to drop a couple pictures in here. Do a shout out to Moribund Media on Instagram. Dropped us a line the other day, had some really kind words about Bottom Dead Center and OSMT. Dropped in, some previews of some really cool pictures they have. They have some great stories of growing up as a young fan of the sport. I mean, Jim Kramer hanging out with you there. Like, there's some cool pictures there, that we're sharing with you right now. So want to send a shout out to Moribund Media. Check them out on Instagram. Appreciate them stopping in, dropping us a line. Also, Mean Duck Productions on Facebook, Chris Parrish. If you have memories, pictures, video, things like that of Ron Bachman, Mean Duck Productions could really use your help rounding up some media for Ron Bachman to help put together like his induction video and things like that for the Monster Truck Hall of Fame. So, drop them a line on Facebook, Mean Duck Productions. I just made like a Google album and, sent my link, to him with some stuff that I had. So, definitely check those guys out. And then, Matt, I was going to ask you, have you been following on Facebook the Mike Retch's T-Rex page? Have you seen any of those cool videos or anything they've been posting on there over the last several months?
Yeah, a little bit. I'll be honest, I'm going to need my memory jogged on it, but I have been seeing some of those videos pop up. It sounds like you're a little more versed than I am, though, on the content.
Right. So, T-Rex, kind of a, late era leaf spring truck. And I don't know a ton about the truck either, which is why this is so cool what happened. So I'm chilling at the hotel the other night, and we'd just gotten in. We hadn't even gone to the pool. And I get a ping on my phone from a cat named Mitch Drops. And he's the admin for this T-Rex monster truck. And now the guy has a mega truck too. So he's kind of the admin for the page. And he was telling us they listen to Bottom Dead Center in their shops. So shout out for that. Thank you. They have some killer old school footage from their own archives that they post on their social media. Some really fun stuff to watch. I mean, like not all like A level, Houston Astrodome shows, but like really cool, like Midwest region, like, B level arena shows and fairground shows, and just some kick ass action too, man, back then. And so anyways, Mitch is the admin for that page. He actually, and I don't want to spoil too many secrets, but he has kind of a really cool build, truck build going on right now that's going to be related, to the heritage of Mike's trucks and things like that. And he was having a Coors in the shop, sent me a picture. So, shout out. And then I had to cheers him back with a Coors picture, but I want to shout out to Mitch and thank him for the kind words, first off, and for reaching out. And then, we're already talking about like, how do we get him and Mike on the show at some point? Because those are the stories we want to hear. I really don't know squat about the T-Rex monster truck from back in the day. I don't think you know a lot either, Matt. So there's more people out there like us that would really benefit, from learning more of their stories. So we're going to talk about trying to get them on early, maybe in 2026, because we do have some pretty exciting guests lined up to join us on the show, tech problems permitting, before the year is over. And then, of course, we'll be looking, to have a whole new fresh batch of content after the first of the year. So the T-Rex monster truck, check him out, Mike. I'm going to spell it right here. I have it in front of me. It's Mike Rex T-Rex monster truck. It's RECH. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I assume I am. T-Rex, Mike Rex. I get it. Hope I got that right. So anyways, check those guys out. And yeah, Matt, I think that's kind of a perfect stopping point for us right now to take a quick intermission break, get a little refreshment on the old drink here, get ourselves ready. We're going to come back in the second half of the show with something and man, I wish Frank could figure out his tech stuff. It'd be great to have him here for it. But we're going to be talking the 1990 TNT ban of Bigfoot number 8 and some of the controversy and opinions and, some opinions that we have about that issue and whether or not, was that the right thing for TNT to do? Who knows? So come back and join us here after the break. We'll be back, part 2 of Bottom Dead Center, season 2, episode 3. And we're going to be talking about the Hateful 8 in the second half of the show. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Superstar monster trucks in their biggest race of the year, and Bigfoot wants Chevy's best bad.
We got beat last year.
It's Chevrolet by a car length.
But not by much.
And it's Awesome Kong. Mark Grant, the rookie, wins it. An incredible victory over the longtime champion Bigfoot.
But it's a new year, and second, it's for the other guys.
Can Bigfoot get revenge? Find out this Friday and Saturday, 8 p.m. in the Astrodome.
So anyways, Matt, that's when I started grinding my feet in his couch. And it was just, oh, hey, you're back again. All right. Bottom dead center. Season 2, episode number 3. We're back, second half of the show. Ready for the round tire discussion. Here with my buddy Matt Looker. It's just us holding it down again tonight. You'd swear that we don't wear electronic deodorant because no one wants to hang out with us. But no, we've been having our share of tech issues this evening. So if anything has seemed kind of wonky across this episode, don't be surprised. We'll probably try a different podcast service next time around. But we're just going through them all until we figure this shit out. So anyways, fit for consumption only by other, ingrates and degraded people like us. So anyhow, we got a pretty cool round tire discussion on hand this evening. We're going to be talking, you saw the title of the episode, Hateful 8. We're talking about Bigfoot number 8 and its ban from TNT Motorsports competition in 1990. And I've been loading up on research, Matt. I've been cramming all day when I could. The help of our OSMT, I'm calling them, man, like they're the big brain research team. We got Matt Stoltz and Justin Mosinger, Chris Mormanis. Those guys are, far more educated on some of the stuff than I am. And what an amazing archive we're getting put together, all of us working together. So with their help, I've kind of compiled some notes on my side for us to reference. But, where do we start? Do we want to get into it kind of chronologically, or, I know we talked before we got on the show, maybe we need to decide just right out of the gate. First off, in our opinion, Bigfoot 8 often gets cited as being the first stage 3 monster truck, but I kind of think you and I both don't necessarily agree with that assessment. What would you say?
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I feel like even just in that racing series in '89, Equalizer was a stage 3 monster truck. And I think probably because Equalizer didn't have as dominant of a performance due to the lack of motor, not that it couldn't get down the track on its own, but Bigfoot definitely brought more power to the game. But Equalizer handled a lot better than every other truck. And even, Army Armstrong was talking to David Cook and David Morris, or Greg Cook, and David Morris, about the way the suspension worked and how radically different it was from every other truck. I think Bigfoot gets a lot of that limelight because of how it could pull away on the short straight line tracks. But it was not the first stage 3 truck in really both of our opinions.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, while the, 88, 89, 90 versions, especially of Equalizer, might look a little crude at times or things like that. That's a word I've heard used to describe that truck's design compared to, maybe more advanced designs. As I understand it, the Taurus 3, the Taurus racer truck, the tube chassis truck, debuted at Arrowhead Stadium in 1989. I was there for that show. I believe that was April of 89. And that truck was dramatically different than anything else on the track that day. It was also pretty unreliable and it looked pretty hard to control, but it was, even to my very young self, whatever I was, like 4 or 5 years old at the time, it was pretty clear that was a whole different kind of truck. We had never seen anything like that. And then, of course, Bigfoot 8 comes out later in the year. It officially debuts at the Bigfoot Family Reunion 5000th show at the Indy Jamboree in September of 1989. It was seen by other people in testing, and people saw videos of it. So, while some of the ideas might have been hard for, maybe less sophisticated monster truck owners and builders and drivers to wrap their heads around, it certainly wasn't the first truck of its kind to flirt with very light weights, relatively speaking, strong horsepower, and some kind of advanced suspension that got away just from traditional leaf spring stuff. So I think if you're going to call Bigfoot 8 the first tube chassis truck, you have to call it like maybe the first entirely round tubing chassis truck, whereas the Taurus truck had, some rectangular tubing through the main frame rails and equalizer, a variety of material shapes appeared to have been used on the equalizer truck. But, kind of with that thought out of the way on the ban on Bigfoot 8. So talking to Matt Stoltz earlier today, he had reminded me that in 1989, Taurus 3, had done some shows for TNT, if I'm not mistaken, and Bowling Green seems to stand out in my mind.
Willman Jr. called Taurus.
That's right, Stan, and this was designed by Dave Cook. They're in Illinois there, and the way this truck is set up, it's a lot like the Mint 400 racers now with a 4-link suspension. There's no leaf springs on this. It's got a coil overload shock. As you can see by the way this vehicle handles, it's going to work out real good with this racing.
Absolutely, 7.42 seconds. Good run for Jack Willman as he goes over that second jump. Let's go down right now to Mike Goss.
Taurus is your fast qualifier. Now, Jack, we haven't seen much of you out here on the Renegades TNT Monster Truck Challenge. Looks like you've got a real nice racing truck. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's a brand new truck. It was just built this year, and it's especially made for this type of racing, so there's no excuses. It's up to me driving it, and I think we have the truck for the capabilities.
I understand it's very light.
Yeah, it's one of your lightest trucks out there. It's in the range of 8,000 pounds, which most of them is lucky to weigh 10 or 12, so, it's a pretty light truck.
And all the research stuff I've been doing, this week, and when I've had time, has been more focused on 1990. But apparently there was quite the outcry from some of the fellow competitors in 1989 about Taurus and, the performance leap that it brought to the table. Gary Porter was cited as, and I believe he might have even alluded to this in, one of the podcast type interviews he's done in the past. It might have been the Scott Douglas conversations, but they were none too pleased, many of these independent monster truck owners, to see Taurus 3 come out and deliver the potential for ass whippings that truck so frequently packed. And so TNT pretty much banned that truck, as I understand it, from competition in 1989. And I don't necessarily know if they stated, hey, and don't bring it back next year either. I'm not saying that TNT said that to the Willmans, but I guess the Willmans just didn't, see the point perhaps in running TNT in 1990 or anything like that. That would have been interesting, because as we get into 1990, Matt, and you had, mentioned earlier too, we were kind of looking over some schedule dates and YouTube playlists of TNT shows and things like that. But Bigfoot 8 didn't even run all of the events right out of the gate in 1980 or in 1990. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Both Equalizer and Bigfoot did not run the first event in Charleston, West Virginia. Shout out to the New Jersey team, Pony Express, for taking what was really not even, I don't know, I guess you could call it a stage 1 truck, and winning events just because the steep first ramp and the shortness of the course allowed the Pony Express to win. I believe he won 1 or 2 of the 3 events, and Gravedigger picked up the other 1 or 2. But yeah, those 2 trucks weren't even at the first event in Charleston.
Well, so we will we'll kind of try and piece this together as best as we can with how the series of events unfolded. But so you bump back again to September 1989. Bigfoot 8 debuts at the 4-wheel jamboree at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, and that's its big coming out party there. And then 8 would actually do some additional competitive events. Before the year was over, of course, it had an event at the Silverdome. There was one at the Astrodome as well, and the truck definitely had its struggles at times. Especially Taurus, you could certainly argue was kind of a tighter truck in terms of the way it handled, especially in the corners. Very light on its feet, pretty well balanced. So Andy was still definitely coming to grips with, handling Bigfoot 8 on turning courses. But then in November of 1989, there was a one-night TNT event at the Charlotte Coliseum in Charlotte, North Carolina. And, so I've talked to some previous Bigfoot drivers and team members that were around back at that time, Gene Patterson and Jim Kramer, like I said earlier today, and, through research I've done with our archivists and things like that, and certainly collating information from so many different sources, it seems like, Bigfoot 8 did perform at that show. So that technically the first TNT event, albeit non-points, for Bigfoot 8 would have been in November of 1989. And it's almost like it was a shakedown race for Bigfoot 8 to gain some sort of approval from TNT to, hey, we're good to race this next year, right? Like, this is what we're going to bring. There's also been, hints and allegations that maybe Andy was sandbagging at that show a little bit to maybe not completely reveal, the true capabilities of that truck, perhaps. Who knows about that? I mean, it'd be pretty hard to hide what that truck was capable of at that time. I feel like it. But then, Matt, we roll into 1990, Bigfoot 8's first appearance on the TNT points chase circuit was January 19th through the 21st in Memphis, Tennessee at the Mid-South Coliseum. So we've got 3 shows that weekend, right, Matt? I believe it was 3. And so rolling into that event, like you talked about, Charleston had happened. What was the other one? Was it Birmingham was non-televised already that had happened?
Yeah, I believe Birmingham was the non-televised event between Charleston and Memphis.
So if you're to believe the information on the TV, Bigfoot 8 debuts on the TNT circuit for 1990 in Memphis with Equalizer already at 159, or sorry, that's leaving Memphis, my bad. Entering Memphis, I don't have there we go. So Gravedigger actually leading the points at 72, Jersey Outlaw at 46, and Equalizer at 42 is what I have in my notes entering Memphis. And so we're not going to go necessarily every show by every show, but I think it is important to go, through these shows real quick, like in Memphis, Matt. So in a nutshell, I think we had Bigfoot 8. Let's see, pull up my notes here. So Memphis, first night, Equalizer defeats Bigfoot 8 in the finals. The second night, we had some controversy over questionable red lights and things like that. Bigfoot 8 defeats Equalizer, and then Bigfoot 8 defeats Equalizer in the third night of competition. But Matt, take us back to that event a little bit. It was not as cut and dry as just straight ahead finals. There was right out of the gate, as soon as you put Bigfoot 8 and Equalizer in the same building, there was problems, there was controversy, there was maybe some questionable officiating by the TNT folks. What do you think?
Yeah, so the first event was not quite as controversial. The second one, like you said, there was maybe not a red light. I remember that event pretty well from TV. I didn't get to watch Monster Trucks a lot on TV back then because of the amount of channels we had and all that. But I remember it was very questionable whether Equalizer red lit or not. And I also remember Bigfoot did not cut a good light at all. So it looked like a giant hole shot for Equalizer at that race. Yeah, I guess controversial is a good way to describe it. I'd have to go back and look at it frame by frame, but I know it was very close whether Equalizer even red lit, and Bigfoot had a very slow start. So it was a decisive, I guess you call it a win for Equalizer, just how much he went across the finish line first. So they went back to the start. And then in the third event, Bigfoot took it, I believe, right?
Yep. And that's so, already, I mean, I remember Army commentating on there, something like, essentially alluding to the fact we don't really do reruns in the sport. Oh, they're going to run them again, Richard, or Scott, I guess at that point. Scott, they're going to run them again. Stop calling me Richard. So, yeah, definitely some, controversy right outside the gate. But then we've got, a few weeks, and then we're almost a month. Well, no, not a month, a couple weeks. And then we're in Houston. And now we're there for the show that was, historically broadcast as part of the American Sports Cavalcade, broadcast, 2 nights there in Houston. And, the first night, nightlife, Dave Wyzorek takes Bigfoot 8 out early in the rounds. And that's, Andy kind of got out of shape. Well, let's put it this way. He's great down into the first turn. Andy was still very much struggling to get a handle on Bigfoot 8 as far as how it performed on turning courses. A little bit of a struggle in the turn, tended to like back the turns up a little bit, it seemed like, over his career early on with number 8, and then tried to make up ground, on that final blast where he could leverage the truck's excellent power to weight ratio and better handling, over that big roller hill and then off towards the set of cars. Excuse me. So he, lays in the throttle pretty hard there and sends, skies the truck off. The side of the cars goes out of bounds essentially. And am I wrong? Did Wyzorek end up taking overall event win that night too? Does that sound right? You're my Wyzorek historian.
Oh man, you put me on the spot. I'm pretty sure he did that race. That was a big win though in that
I think
venue.
He did.
Yeah, in that venue against that truck, that was a huge win for Nightlife. And also a shout out to Nightlife for beating Equalizer in I want to say the next event, straight up. Dave Wyzorek, they used to call him a Fox because he'd hammer you if you weren't watching.
So then night 2 in Houston, Bigfoot 8 goes to the finals against Bennett Clark and Clydesdale. Pulls that win off fairly handily, and then we're off to Albuquerque from there. Let me back that up. On TV, I believe we're then off to Albuquerque, but we have some pretty good video footage of the Salt Lake City untelevised races where Bigfoot and Andy performed pretty well at altitude up there. I believe that was 3 shows, and then 4 shows at the Nassau Coliseum, where 8 must have done a pretty good job of holding its own. So according to what I've been able to piece together, coming out of Salt Lake and Nassau Coliseum into Albuquerque, Equalizer holding on to a 286-point lead over Bigfoot's 269 points. But now finally in Albuquerque, Andy builds up a pretty decent head of steam. First night defeats Carolina Crusher. And the finals in the second night defeats King Crunch. And I don't know if Equalizer was just can't remember if Equalizer just wasn't a factor in that or not. But as we're skimming over this, so the points leaving Albuquerque, Bigfoot has finally, for the first time of the year, assumed, a points lead leaving an event weekend. And we're already now at March 30th and 31st in Albuquerque. So, April Fool's Day leaving Albuquerque, Bigfoot 8 is leading the points at 319 to Equalizer's 308. And this is where things start to unravel a little bit for the Bigfoot team. So I think there's a common misconception, unless people really go back and try and look at this stuff, Matt. And I've even had that misconception myself. I kind of just, without thinking about it for a long time, just kind of assumed that as soon as Bigfoot 8 showed up, it just won every race. And while it certainly performed well, that points battle would have you really realize that wasn't exactly the case, was it? It was still seeing some pretty significant competition and success from other trucks in the field.
That's right, especially as the summer went on. And I think, without throwing any shade to the truck or to the driver, Andy Brass, who was certainly fighting handling on that truck, the longer courses, the turning courses, Bigfoot 8 did not really shine at. I know the first time that I went to Lebanon Valley as a kid for a show, West Leb as they call it, Thunder Chicken beat him on a long outdoor track because of the handling problems with that truck. That we'll hit that a little bit later. But yeah, that's a good way you put it. I had kind of assumed that it was real dominant as well without really thinking about it. And then when you go and look at the results and think about some specific races, Bigfoot really did not dominate that whole year like it seems like banning a truck would have you think that it was.
Correct. An emerging dominant force, perhaps. Overtly dominant, I would say not overly, concerning to the competitors, certainly. So TNT then, essentially bans Bigfoot 8. So I'm going to try and read to you some documented stuff from some four-wheel drive magazines and stuff. So let me read this to you from one of the four-wheel drive magazines we found some stuff in. In what seems to be a surprising step backwards, TNT Motorsports has effectively banned the new tube chassis Bigfoot truck from further competition in the 1990 Renegades TNT Monster Truck Challenge. In an April 5th memo sent to all TNT competitors, so once again, folks, we left Albuquerque, on April 1st, let's say, and the next TNT points event, at least that a Bigfoot truck would appear at, would be Dallas on April 27th. So, we're nearly a month from that event. Anyhow, this little piece goes on to state, in an April 5th, 1990 memo sent to all TNT competitors, some rules clarifications were made. One item read, quote, suspension / absolute and final for 1990. No radical suspension will be run. Leaf, coil, or coilover will be accepted. A review of this will be held in early fall for the 1991 season, end quote. In addition, it was noted in the memo that the rules were, quote, set down to control the sport for entertainment value and the competition for safety reasons, end quote. A source at TNT told us Bigfoot 8's presence was a trial deal to see whether or not the truck would dominate. It did. They, Bigfoot, had to go. Bigfoot creator Bob Chandler contests the idea that his suspensions are inherently unsafe due to their sophisticated design. Similar designs have been used in off-road racing for years with no complaints. Chandler claims that the so-called, quote, trial was last November's event in Charlotte, North Carolina. Chandler also says he has a contract with TNT to compete for 2 years. He may fight it or race one of the older, more conventional trucks. Imagine if the United States Auto Club, USAC, had done the same thing decades ago. We'd be seeing front-engine roadsters with ride-along mechanics at the 1991 Indy 500. Pretty scathing stuff right there, Matt. Yeah. I love the reference to USAC in Indy 500. And so then, and I don't, unfortunately, some of these clips I don't have dates on, but there's another magazine clip here that says Bigfoot 4x4 Incorporated has filed suit against TNT Motorsports in a dispute over new rules that outlaw the radical suspension installed in its Bigfoot 8 monster truck. Bob Chandler, president of St. Louis, Missouri-based Bigfoot 4x4, says that the new rules will be detrimental to the sport and set, quote, monster truck racing back 10 years, end quote. Quote again, we are not going to allow one truck to dominate our sport because of a radically different suspension, counters TNT founder and president Billy Joe Miles, who contends that the revised guidelines support fair competition and that monster truck racing has grown to a point where it needs to be governed as any other motorsport. TNT says guidelines will be modified as technology advances for all vehicles in the sport. Quote, we simply cannot sacrifice the fairness and legitimacy of the sport for the benefit of one monster truck, end quote, Miles said. Prior to its expulsion from TNT Racing, Bigfoot 8 dominated the 1990 Renegades Monster Truck Challenge, winning 12 of 15 races. Okay, so I'd have to sit there and we'd really have to go back and try and determine if 12 of 15 is actually what Bigfoot 8 had won up to that point. I mean, I'm showing 1, 2 in Memphis, 1 in Houston, 2 in Albuquerque. I'm showing 5. So we had Salt Lake and Nassau in there. So that's 9 in their total events, I believe, up for the win. And I think Bigfoot won 2 to 3 of them in Salt Lake. So there is a chance between the outliers of Salt Lake and Nassau that the truck, could have piled some pretty substantial wins on. But even still, coming into or leaving Albuquerque, Bigfoot is only looking at an 11-point lead over Equalizer at that point. So I could, in fairness, see a little, panic and frustration perhaps setting in for the teams a little bit with it. But I'd like to get your opinion because I've been talking too much here, but I wanted to read those 2 pieces that we had. What are your thoughts on, at this point, they're banning Bigfoot 8, but do you agree, A, does the truck need banned from a competition standpoint, but B, their suspension rule seems kind of vague. absolute and final, no radical suspension. So what does radical mean? I mean, look at the leaf spring stacks and 27 shocks on Clydesdale. That's pretty radical, circa 1988. But also I understand, leaf, and I guess I can get some coil springs on there, but how would coilover shocks like giant Custer shocks or homemade coilovers or whatever, how's that not radical, basically straight up compared to the nitrogen shocks on Bigfoot? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Bigfoot was always a dominant force in monster trucks. Whether you want to say that they dominated every event, Bigfoot was always a dominant force in monster trucks, being that they always had the top of the line equipment, even if it was the same style as the other trucks. They had great working equipment, some of the best drivers, some of the best funding. And I think this new suspension was just a little bit more than they had in previous years. But yeah, like you said, the Custer style shocks and the coilover shocks, Equalizer had them the year before, and he won the championship. There was no talk about banning Equalizer then. I think it was, and
I'd like to know what percentage. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, another thing that kind of sticks out to me is you got to feel for Bob Chandler. Before he's arguing with TNT, he was feuding with Everett Jasmer with USA 1 when Everett was having the rules gamed to limit the cubic inch. Or TNT had tried to limit the cubic inch rules on the motors to 560, I believe. And Everett ran 572s. And then a lot of teams downsized their engines to meet that rule, or 540 or whatever it was. And then Everett had the rule changed 2 weeks before it was supposed to go into effect. So someone like Bob Chandler is having to fight his competitors from a rule standpoint and the promoter, the sanctioning body, from a rules standpoint. Just something else that kind of stuck out to me when we were going through this.
Well, and we're such a small sport and a small industry, right? So like and because trucks are to some extent or another booked into shows for the most part, these business arrangements tend to be a little, they're messier, they're stickier, they're more complex in some ways than simply, we are a sanctioning body, here's the rules. If you meet our rules, come on out and race. And it doesn't work like that for monster trucks. The economics of that don't work that way. But yeah, I mean, so because of that, the people making the rules for the series might be the people that you're dealing with to get booked on the series in the first place. And so when you have star power or championships to your name, like Everett or like Bob, your opinions might carry more weight with the sanctioning body at times than maybe a Gary Porter or a Scott Stevens. But it seems pretty clear to me that by the time we, the TNT series pays its visit to Irving Stadium in Dallas, or Texas Stadium, whatever it was called back then, people's voices are being heard.
The preeminent story is Bigfoot 8. Here he was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, blowing away the field. After taking a year off to build this truck, no question Bigfoot 8 is dominated. But now TNT has banned Bigfoot 8 to let the other trucks catch up technologically. Here's Army Armstrong, and he's with Bigfoot 8 driver Andy Brass.
Well, thanks, Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of monster truck racing. There has been a major rule change take place in this sport. It affects only one truck, the big blue truck of Bob Chandler, your current national points leader. Standing with me is Andy Brass, the gentleman that was driving Bigfoot number 8, the truck that was affected by the rules change. Andy, tell me exactly what it is all about.
Well, the new rule change is that the truck must contain either leaf springs, coil springs, or coilover shocks. Our truck doesn't. Our truck runs a nitrogen-charged shock on a cantilever suspension, which gives the truck a lot of travel. We're roughly running 20 to 24 inches of travel. The truck's been working real good, and it's been proven. I took over the points champion with the truck, and like I say, it works so well that the guys are having a hard time keeping up with us, so now they're banning us from competition until further notice.
Okay, let's get back to that one point. The guys are having problems. The guys you're talking about, or the other competitors, are racing against you. Their point is this, Andy. They say, look, he came in second one year and didn't come back and race with us. We raced the whole year. These guys, Bigfoot, was touring with another company. They weren't even running with us. If we'd have had the year they had off, we could have built a good truck too. What's your all stance on that?
Well, they could have took a year off, I feel. We run with other promoters and stuff last year. We didn't run the truck as much as what we wanted to with TNT. We did take the time off. We designed us a new truck, and like I say, it was a year off. It was a year designing. The truck was put together. We tested it for 3 months. We brought it out this year, and we proved to them proved to the people that the truck will work. It does work. It's a fast truck. It's a safer truck. The truck flies better. It stops a lot easier. It's a lot easier on the driver. It's a lot better truck. The truck is more technically advanced, and because of that, we're being penalized and sold out.
That's the story from the blue truck side, the Bigfoot side. Let's check with Chris Chapman and find out what the other side of this big story is.
Thanks, Army. I've just spoken with TNT officials, and they say that they're in the process of deciding what to do with Bigfoot 8. TNT's goal is to keep the sport as competitive as possible, and right now the apparent key to solving this controversy is time. Time is what it's going to take for the other drivers to get their new trucks ready for the circuit. At that time, TNT plans to let Bigfoot 8 return. This should all take place within a couple of weeks. Back to you, Scott and Army.
A wounded and struggling Bigfoot 4 and John Pyant that arrived there to take over the Bigfoot duties for at the time, probably an indeterminate period of time. They were trying to decide, is 4 going to run through the rest of the series? Is the lawsuit or something else going to win and let us bring Bigfoot 8 back in? But, Scott Stevens at this point, and to some point, or to some extent too, our guy with Equalizer, not Greg Holbrook, Gary Cook, he'd been voicing some opinions on the negative side about Bigfoot 8. Scott Stevens had certainly more than said his share, I think is fair to say. Gary Porter had mentioned some stuff. I got to find the clip and drop it in here, but I love the clip of Dennis.
The drivers are rightfully upset that Bigfoot could have raced last year and chose not to. Here's what some of them had to say about the new Bigfoot truck.
Well, it's sort of mixed feelings. Last year he wouldn't come out and play with us, and this year he's coming out and picking on us. And so he took a year off to, sort of regroup and build a new truck, and that's all he's doing is coming out and picking on us this year.
Well, obviously he has a definite advantage over any of us. He's had a lot of time to get his stuff together and come back out with a new truck. And I don't know, I guess I compare my truck. My truck's a couple years old, and it's really out of his league, So I don't know, all I can do is the best I can to beat him.
I don't think the design of the truck is a problem, but they should have been out running with us that in 1989. But I don't know, what do you do about it? That's the politics.
Well, I don't like it right now because Bigfoot's dominating, but I don't know, if I could do the same thing, I'd probably do it too, but I don't think the suspension that he's running is fair to be running with leaf spring trucks, and the reason I say that right now is because I can't afford his suspension that he's running.
You're talking about the new designs. You are the guy, you and Gary Cook and Ray are the guys that opened that can of worms, and you came out with a new chassis. Everybody is copying and coming out with other new chassis designs. That's a problem that may come back to haunt you in 1990.
That's true, but we're going to have a jump right now. And nobody's not going to be able to build this truck in 2 or 3 months' time. So if we can start out this year with a super fast truck, then maybe we'll have enough jump on everybody to do good at the end of the year.
Army's over with Scott right now.
Scott, the question of the night, is there anything anybody can do to beat that blue Ford?
That's going to be a Bigfoot year, Army.
You really think it will? I mean, this is just the first time everybody's been together. You're conceding?
Yeah, the year's over as far as the champion. That truck's brand new, and he's dominating by a second. There's nothing, because everybody else, we're out here racing every weekend, and we're not going to be able to get our truck together, to build a new truck this year. So as far as I'm concerned, I think it's over with unless they crash the truck.
I thought that was a great piece of honesty from Dennis, saying, I essentially don't like that this truck's probably going to whip all our butts right now, but I'm just saying that because I can't afford it right this second. Otherwise, I'd have one too. I think that's what everybody should have been saying, is if we'd have thought of this or paid better attention in 1989 or had the budget to build something like this, then yes, we would have one right now. So that's where it starts reeking to me a little bit of, I'm going to throw my toys out the pram because for whatever variety of economic or fabrication ability or whatever material access, whatever your excuse or your reason or your justification was, I didn't do as much homework as what Bigfoot did for Bigfoot 8. in the 1990s. But boy, Matt, this is like an artichoke. We're peeling layers back on this discussion. Not for the first time tonight. We find ourselves having to go back to 1989 in the rearview mirror. I would love to know the percentage of races if somebody out there wants to cook them up for us. Paging Jack Meredith. What percentage of races did Equalizer win? If it's anywhere close to the supposed 60%, I think they said that Bigfoot won. I'd be really curious to know. I'm starting to sound like a crazy radio pundit right now, throwing out some pretty bold opinions and challenges on this stuff. But looking back at 1989, you hear people during the TNT broadcasts in 1990, and Porter's one of the guys, and I hear Scott Douglas, say it as the host of the show a lot, talking about how Bigfoot didn't run the TNT tour in 1989. Oh, Bigfoot, he stayed home. He didn't come out and play with us, and he stayed home while we're out here running, and he built this fancy truck, and he brung it on out, and I just don't think it's fair. I mean, that's kind of the gist of what people were saying. So I had to go back and look in the schedule archives a little bit, Matt, and it was like 13 or more TNT points events that Andy Brass, and I say events, I mean like cities, it was like 13 some odd cities that Bigfoot visited in 1989 that were TNT points races. Just to name a few of them: St. Paul, Toronto, Biloxi. They called on Bigfoot to help carry the load of the New York mini tour. So, I mean, gosh dang, dude, there's so many. You go through an Excel spreadsheet trying to highlight the New York mini tour in there. And I mean, you've got Buffalo, you've got Weedsport, you've got Middletown, Canandaigua, Watertown, West Lebanon. So they counted on Bigfoot to help pull the weight through a really crucial part of the summer there, where attrition, as you know, Matt, and you've done shows at those venues, you've gone to shows at those venues like West Lebanon. Those are wars of attrition in the monster truck industry when you stack up high-powered events like that in a short period of time. So I think that's pretty disingenuous to insinuate that they made it sound like Bigfoot had one truck. It was Bigfoot 4. Andy Brass was the driver. They fucking park that, and then they just go and build and test and refine Bigfoot 8. That's kind of the impression I feel like that they were trying to put out there. Almost like they were strengthening TNT's case against Bigfoot before the ban even happened. I would not be surprised if talk of wanting the truck banned started on weekend one in Memphis. And I feel like there was a bit of a hit piece going on there. What do you think on that? Are they already trying to shade the picture before it's fully colored in, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. And Memphis was a track that really was conducive to Bigfoot 8. The first obstacle was not real abrupt, the first hill, and it was a shorter track. Some of those, the indoor tracks, basically you either had 7 or 8 cars or you had 10 or 12 cars, and that was an 7 or 8 car set. So it was a small hill, and then Bigfoot was able to settle down real easy in between those cars and jump to the finish. And he won a lot that weekend. I know we talked about how Equalizer reran it, and Equalizer won one event besides that. But I think it was such a good debut performance, I guess. Not really debut, but good first 1990 performance for Bigfoot 8 that it really kind of ruffled some feathers and put a bad taste in some other competitors' mouth, because the truck looked so much better on that track than most of the other trucks.
No, totally. And coming back to 1989 again, the talk is, well, why didn't Bigfoot run, all those points races and things like that? So let me offer this out there as well, too. No doubt they're trying to build and develop Bigfoot 8. And with an early eye on Andy Brass being their, chosen hot shoe to drive that truck in 1990, I mean, hell, he had to start running it by September of 1989. Andy's input and ability to, work with the team on developing that truck was certainly really important. But you look through the schedule archives, 1989 was the first year that Bigfoot sent a truck to Australia. Bigfoot 2 goes down there. So that pulls, I would call in 1989, Bigfoot 2 and Bigfoot 3 were probably the mid-level workhorses of the fleet. They thankfully weren't trying to race them very much. But on one side of the hand, while TNT's making it sound like Bigfoot didn't come out and play with us and whatever, TNT had no problem booking the shit out of Bigfoot 2 and Bigfoot 3, especially those two trucks, to carry the freight at a ton of TNT pulling events that required monster truck, halftime car crushes or end of show car crushes, whatever you want to call it. So I know those aren't points events, and I'm not saying they were competitive racing or anything like that. But what I am saying is you just see show after show after show in the archives of 2 and 3 slogging it out, crushing cars at shows and things like that. Gene's out there driving 3, Donnie Brightweiser's out there driving 2. So what about the rest of the fleet? Well, once you take 2 out of the fleet to send it to Australia, that shrinks your available fleet of competitive or even just big, normal, Bigfoot trucks. Andy's running 4 all over the place. He's doing SRO events. He's doing TNT events. Fast Tracks is out with Dan Dubes working like crazy. Bachman's out doing shows with 6. And like I said, Andy's in 4, Kramer's in 7. Gene does a couple shows in 7. Kramer was still very competitive with 7 in 1989. And then you're still trying to develop, Bigfoot 8 through a lot of this stuff. You're trying to maintain your Ford dealer displays that are such a key part of the Bigfoot sponsorship at the time. And then you've got the Tango and Cash movie, of course. They did filming for that as well. And that was I'm showing that as being in early August of 1989. So the truth is Bigfoot 8 probably needed to be fully shook down by at the latest mid-July. I mean, I would want that truck shook down by early July at the very latest to try and fix any, serious issues with it before I dressed it, to go to film that show in Burbank. It's out there for the better part of it, at least a week, if not more. And then the next thing you know, you're trying to get everything prepped and looking right to oh gosh, it was even more than a week, out there in California for 7 and 8. So just for Tango and Cash, just that little bit part of the monster trucks in that movie. And it's crazy that Bigfoot got that gig because they're not even identified even remotely close to being Bigfoot trucks in that movie. But you're pulling those 2 trucks out of the rotation, or at least one of them, because 8 hadn't really debuted, out of the rotation for a period of time. And then you got to get everything brought back. And guess what? You're just a couple weeks away from the Indy Jamboree, and 7 has to be repainted and re-identified from its sort of security contractor sheriff's department colors from Tango and Cash. And 8 needs any last minute things corrected that you can on it. And then everything's got to be ready to go to Indy at the end of the month. And then before you know it, 8's out doing shows at the Astrodome and the Shakedown show for TNT in Charlotte and the SEMA show, and poof, we're into 1990. So I know I just went on a super long ramble there, Matt, and I'm sorry for that, but that is a point I've been dying to make for a long time, is the Bigfoot family was anything but idle in 1989, where I do feel like the Tough Tracks show and some of the competitors were trying to paint the picture like they just parked their shit and just dialed in on number 8.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, because from a TV standpoint, Bigfoot was basically said to be totally MIA in 1989, and it's not true, like you were saying. They were even on a couple TV shows, so it's especially funny looking back at it. But when coming into 1990, the talk was definitely that Bigfoot took the year off. That was said verbatim. By
and
someone
so
else.
now, sorry. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I was going to say it was said verbatim in 1990, Bigfoot took a year off.
So we've established that Bigfoot did anything but take off 1989. They might not have ran the full TNT points tour, but it's super disingenuous to imply that, 4 was not doing, some big shows back, through there, even if they weren't TNT. So we get to Dallas, Bigfoot 8's band. We talked about, TNT's technical justification for it. The truck, performs pretty poorly at the 3 wide race in Dallas, Texas. And then we don't see Bigfoot back at a TNT event all the way. So let's see, Dallas is April 27th and 28th. And then we don't see a Bigfoot truck back at a TNT points paying event until June 9th and 10th at Louisville, Kentucky. So over a month of time, elapses before a Bigfoot truck, comes back. And I'm pretty sure they reference later on, Matt, you'll probably remember this, when Bigfoot 8 comes back on TV, which is Flemington in late July, late July, Army references, they've had the truck out west trying to dial it in and everything like that. Well, it would not surprise me, and I apologize, I don't have the lineups of every freaking show in front of me, but when Andy went out to San Jose, to Spartan Stadium, to Walla Walla, Washington, to Kennewick, Washington, the rodeo grounds in Salinas, California, and to the Yakima Fairgrounds, I believe Dennis and Digger and Gary Porter and Carolina Crusher were doing some of those shows out there with Andy at these, West Coast events. And part of why I suspect they were out there for some of those Dave Matthews, ZZYZX, Zizix, however you want to say it, shows, is because on his interview with Scott Douglas, on Conversations with Scott Douglas, Porter tells a funny story about Andy Brass in the Bigfoot hauler, Dennis in the Gravedigger hauler, and himself in his Carolina Crusher hauler getting into some trouble coming across my neck of the woods in southern Wyoming. And somebody hollering at him on the CB that they had a roadblock set up in Nebraska to catch those monster truck guys that are doing 90 plus on the highway and all this stuff. And, Porter makes a reference to that they were going to Louisville after that, and that Andy wanted no part of, getting caught up in a, traffic stop or a roadblock or anything like that. There was talk of Dennis's driving with a suspended license, and Porter had to park his rig and get a ride back to Dennis's to bring it somewhere to park. I don't know, man. There was some sketchy shit happening is what it sounded like to me. And in today's era, I'm sure a lot of that would be jail time or out of service. But in any event, so those guys were still running together, even if it wasn't on TNT points, and they were getting plenty of cracks at each other with their newer Bigfoot truck in the mix and all that kind of stuff. And so we come to Louisville, and Matt, I think it's a fan favorite venue, fan favorite track. The particular races that happened between Bigfoot 4 and a couple of these trucks in Louisville, what else can you say? They are just absolutely iconic. I mean, I think you and I cited Andy's comeback win against Carolina Crusher and his near victory against Equalizer in Bigfoot 4. Once again, Matt, a struggling Bigfoot 4 with an injector system issue. And remind me, was this mid-season in TNT? Was that around the time they tried to drop the cubic inch limit again to 500? Does that sound right?
Yeah. They also, around the time of Bowling Green, which was mid-season, they also changed them to make them run on gas instead of alcohol. They made a lot of rule changes throughout the year. I remember John Kwasniewski and Buffalo Trimmer was bemoaning that in one of his interviews. It seemed like they made a lot of rule changes throughout the year in a motorsport that already you're doing good if you can stay ahead on breakage, let alone tuning anything to make it run better. So there were a lot of rule changes throughout the year. And I don't know for sure when that cubic inch limit was introduced, but it was sometime in mid-90.
Andy is taking, a struggling Bigfoot 4 and, trying to do something with it here, trying to maintain some kind of standing in the points, because now, as we know, Bigfoot has a lawsuit going against TNT. And so then Pyant, back behind the wheel of Bigfoot 4, has to run Richmond, Virginia at the NASCAR track there. You and I talked about that earlier, how crazy it was, how narrow it was. They were racing down that narrow pit road at Richmond. And then you mentioned Bowling Green, Matt, where Pyant was kind of I think he was losing his way to the semifinals once or twice in Bowling Green there. Yeah, he went out to King Crunch one night and then got knocked out by Equalizer the second show, it looks like. So then we come to Myrtle Beach, and now we have to split some hairs on some stuff here. So we come to Myrtle Beach, Matt. This ends up being the final, I believe, TNT event for Bigfoot 4 in 1990 as far as points-paying events go. Myrtle Beach Speedway, South Carolina. Equalizer at this point, has a points lead. In fact, I want to say it's 462 for Equalizer against Bigfoot's 422 coming into Myrtle Beach. And the Breen Brothers team Micro Machines truck, which is essentially a tube chassis truck with, coil-over shocks on it. I just reached out to Matt Stoltz, and he clarified for us. They lifted the cubic inch limit, but anything over 500 cubic inches had to be on gas, which was prompting the issues with 4 in Louisville because it was a 540 that set for methanol injection. That's what I thought. So it was a above 500 cubic inch engine, and they were trying to get it by on race gas. So obviously, they no doubt played with injector nozzles, injector settings, fuel pump settings, pills, everything to try and get that thing to run better off the line on gas, and that's why it was struggling there. But we come back, like I said, to Myrtle Beach. So I wish I could have gotten like up close and personal somehow with the Micro Machines truck back in the heyday to see what it really looked like up close and personal.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Scott Douglas. Welcome to Tough Tracks. Once again, the TNT Monsters are in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for more side-by-side competition. Last week, it was Greg Holbrook and the Equalizer taking the victory. He'll try to do it again here today. But Army Armstrong, one of the big stories today in Myrtle Beach, is going to be to keep our eyes on the Bigfoot 4 truck. This could be the last time we see Bigfoot 4 in TNT competition.
Yeah, the word's come down to us that this will be the last time we're going to see 4 because they're going after the World Championship, but they're going to use the 8 truck to do it. Now, those of you that follow the sport know the scenario. The 8 truck, they had to set it out for 2 months in order to allow the rest of the trucks to catch up with it. And I believe it could have happened. If you look at the truck right behind us, you'll notice some new shock absorbers. These shocks cost $1,500 a piece. They're manufactured in California. A lot of people are getting involved in the technical end of these monster trucks, so the drivers feel like, bring on Bigfoot 8, we're ready for him.
You're talking about the shocks of the Micro Machines right behind us. What makes them different, Army?
They're gas-type shocks. They're a heavier shock. They're the same basic shock that's used in off-road racing in California. But because of the weight of these trucks, they have to be much sturdier. The man that designed the shock, that actually invented the shock, has his name on it, but he's covered the name up. There's a lot of secrecy here. He says if these shocks don't work, I'll give you your money back and buy you a whole new setup. So he believes in the shocks. We saw him run once last week. I was impressed with it. This could be the hot hand for the rest of the year, Scott.
Something else we saw.
Why are we making a distinction or an exception in this new rule change, Matt, for coilover Custer-style off-road shocks versus Bigfoot's nitrogen shocks? Why are we making a difference that there needs to be a mechanical spring essentially, or else otherwise your nitrogen shock is not okay? Well, I've got nitrogen shocks. He's got a nitrogen shock with a coil wrapped around it. Yes, we know the semantics, there's differences, but to me, the bigger difference is what's the weight of the truck? Maybe engine placement. What's the chassis design? Is it one of these newfangled stage 3 trucks, or is it an old heavy stage 2 truck? So if you took Bigfoot 8 shocks and you grafted them onto Micro Machines, that's all it would take to suddenly make Micro Machines illegal? I mean, that's how I understand it.
That's the way that the rules were written, but in practice, like you were kind of alluding to, it's silly. Almost. Micro Machines was not dominant by any means. It was competitive. It was a good running truck. No. But Micro Machines did not whoop up on, let's say, Carolina Crusher, which was solidly a stage 2 truck with a heavy duty power plant, and a good driver. Like Micro Machines was not, you could never say it was dominant. It just was a good competitive truck.
I think you could have made it more dominant, right? Like if the Breens would have had more resources or, understood, some of the technology that was maybe available to them better or different things like that. But as far as, are we looking at elapsed times on the track to determine if a truck's legal or not? Or are we looking at only the kind of shocks that it has? Or does it have to be a quote unquote like a space frame chassis? Does it have to be this stage 3 thing? Can I see holes through the thing? Is it not built out of C channel or a truck chat? Like, to me, as what little I'm able to understand the rules, and I don't have my hands on a 1990 TNT Monster Truck rulebook. If anyone out there has one scanned in they'd like to share with us, we'd be happy to eat some of our words if we're wrong on some of this stuff, but we're just going off of what we've got here. And again, just a reminder, the point I'm saying is I don't think Bigfoot 8 needed banned. So I'm talking to Jim Kramer earlier today, and, you know, he points out with me, you know, we're talking and we kind of come to this conclusion that if I was a fan at home, you know, and I saw Bigfoot 8 on TV, right? So maybe you saw the Sports Cavalcade broadcast and Andy sends that thing like out there on some of those jumps, and you're like, whoa, there's this new Bigfoot. It's got red and yellow stripes and it just flies super high. It's on the TNT show. And then you're like, oh, the TNT show's coming to my local racetrack. You know, let's go see Bigfoot. I want to see this new Bigfoot. And you get there, and it's all the same really kick-ass trucks you saw on the TV show, except for one. Bigfoot 8's not there. You got Bigfoot 4. Still a cool truck. I'd love to go back in time and watch it run. But I'd feel a little gypped as a fan if what I had been seeing on TV as the supposed pinnacle of Bigfoot technology on the supposed best racing circuit in the United States for monster trucks, and I get there and that truck's not there. And it's actually because the promoter chose to not have it there willingly. It wasn't like Bigfoot said, you can't have Bigfoot 8. It's going to Portland. No. So I feel like that's an interesting angle to think about too. Were you even doing what was best for the fans at that point?
Yeah, that's a real good point. And especially back then, without having the internet, without knowing what trucks are going to be there, just knowing that this promoter has this event at, you know, this venue, and seeing it on TV, and the commercials you'd see on TV, I guarantee they had Bigfoot 8 in their commercials. I know they did on some of them. So,
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and you know, you're going to one of their marquee events. You're not going to a small arena show, which, like, I know when I was a kid, the Albany show versus West Lebanon, the Albany show was always a small show. You'd see video from, you know, on the commercials, and you're like, well, I'm obviously not seeing the track and the trucks that are at the Silverdome at this hockey arena. But if you're going to, like, a West Lebanon later in the year, okay, this is all the TNT trucks. They're at this track that they run on TV, and now Bigfoot 8's not there, which doesn't count at West Lebanon, but you get the point I'm making. That's a real good point. It's like, why are we being gypped a little bit here?
No, that's what I'm saying, man. If your series is the best and the brightest out there, then I want to see the best and the brightest versions of all those trucks out there running around too. I mean, here's a fair question. Let's say Dennis brought Gravedigger 3, his first tube chassis, stage 3 truck. If Dennis brought Gravedigger 3 out the week after Dallas when the Bigfoot 8 ban, Dennis was selling a shitload of merch for TNT, and he was very popular, rightfully so. Would TNT have sent Digger 3 home? Would they? I don't know. Would they have called Bob and said, okay, fine, Dennis has one now, you can bring yours back? You know, like, I question if there's not potential for some hypocrisy, you know, and obviously, you know, this is ifs and ands and buts and whatever. But I think if Gravedigger would have, and hey, I'm the first one to recognize Bigfoot bias exists. I get it. I certainly have plenty of my own. I've been at shows as a driver where the promoter screwed me on the call at the finish line because he didn't like Bigfoot, or probably more accurately, didn't like me as a Bigfoot driver. Or I've gotten calls that I wasn't so sure I won the race at because I was driving Bigfoot. You know what I mean? So in the case of TNT here, I think taking Bigfoot 8 out of the series was not the best thing for the fans. But had Gravedigger shown up with a stage 3 truck in the middle of the season, I don't believe, even if it was during the Bigfoot 8 ban, they would have sent that truck home. They'd have turned around and said, well, I guess we got to let Bigfoot 8 back because the best-selling T-shirt truck on the tour just brought one of these, new contraptions of their own. I wish it would have happened that way. That'd have been really fucking interesting, honestly. So we get into Myrtle Beach. I digress. We're leaving Myrtle Beach. Equalizer now sitting at 510 points on the season. Bigfoot at 451 points. So, we're back to 60 some odd point gap there. That's pretty substantial. And then Weed Sport happens, non-TV. And then we come back from Weed Sport into Flemington, New Jersey. That's where, the TV show reintroduces. Bigfoot 8 back to the series, Equalizer at 535 points to Bigfoot's 455. So their ban worked. They took a slim lead of Bigfoot's and completely diminished it, to help see Equalizer, out to pretty far in front of the field. And now I want to think about this for a second. So Equalizer is at 535 points to Bigfoot's 455 points. At any point in the season, did we see a gap that big for Bigfoot over Equalizer? I'm going back and kind of looking at the numbers here, and it's like 342, 338, 319 to 308, even after the damn Salt Lake City and Nassau stuff. Let's see. Equalizer's 286, Bigfoot's 269. So Bigfoot had that 319 to 308 lead getting out of Albuquerque. And then Equalizer had the lead in Dallas. Bigfoot had a slight lead after Louisville Motor Speedway. It looks like 384 to 375. But then after Richmond, Equalizer reassumes the lead, maintains the lead after Bowling Green, really opening a gap after Myrtle Beach. And then by the time we get back to Flemington, like I said, we go into Flemington with Equalizer 535 to 455. And then after Flemington, where Bigfoot 8 did not have the greatest of weekends, and we're going to talk about why here as we get closer to West Lebanon as well. Equalizer's at 548 to Bigfoot's 477. So pretty steady gap being maintained there. We roll through Middletown, New York, non-TV there, and Canandaigua, non-TV there as well. Can-Am Speedway, Matt. We just talked about that earlier here in season 2. Nice. And then we finally get to West Lebanon. Fucking marquee event in West Lebanon. A tough place to go and try and win. And Equalizer still comes out of West Lebanon with the points lead. Now let's take a break here, Matt. We're at West Lebanon. We're at July 23rd, 24th of 1990, so halfway through the year, but definitely winding down, the final couple months of the TNT tour. You made a great point earlier. Bigfoot 8 seemed really optimized for those indoor TNT tracks where it was like a big, smooth, sculpted dirt roller, a quick blast, and then a decent length set of cars. But the finish line pretty much always in the air with maybe a couple cars left that you're kind of landing on as you cross over that finish line. So you explained how good Bigfoot was on those shorter indoor tracks. And I think you're going to go the same direction with this that I would go. Why is Bigfoot 8 struggling with handling issues now on these bigger outdoor tracks with 2 big sets of cars instead of just the little roller hills?
So the indoor track's really one kind of motion. You jump the first hill. As it lands, you romp on the throttle, get over the second one. That's with a truck like Bigfoot 8 that soaks up the jumps. The long outdoor tracks is 2. You go over the first obstacle, the truck settles out because you're landing on cars. You're not jumping this whole set of cars. You land on the cars, then you've got to straighten up and throttle to the finish. And Bigfoot 8 did not like that very much. And, Andy Brass is a good driver. They were struggling with that truck. Stafford Springs and West Lebanon come to mind the most, just for me. I'm sure there were other opportunities or other instances, I should say, where it came down to the mishandling of Bigfoot. But a little bit of water on the track, or not even water on the track, in no man's land, Bigfoot would be almost sideways in the lane. You know, for all of the good things you could say about Kid Rarigan Thunder Chicken, that was not a truck that would go out and whoop up on the trucks on a long outdoor track. And he beat Bigfoot. I believe No Problem did as well. As an aside, just before I forget, I don't think we mentioned that Equalizer had a driver change in the middle of Roanoke. David Morris left the team, and then the owner, Gary Cook, drove it the last show at Roanoke, and then Greg Holbrook took over, and I think really kind of brought that team to the next level. So I think it would be remiss to not mention Greg Holbrook taking the reins of Equalizer in kind of the earlier part of the 1990 season, just as kind of an aside.
You know, I loved his interviews back then too. You know, Army's like, man, it's a wild ride out there. You got a complex truck, rear stem truck, everything, you know. Yeah, Army, just get in. It's just like driving a quad. It's just like riding a four-wheeler, like just super. It took a lot in that season to get anything out of that kid in an interview. I can certainly tell you that. But to your point, Matt, and I don't know if it's, I think it's a combination of things. Pretty powerful truck, not super heavy, you know, still close to 10,000 pounds, so reasonably heavy. But the cut tires, you know, shaved down real low. That truck definitely seemed like it had some balance issues to me. We're talking about Bigfoot 8 again here. Some balance issues, way too soft on the sway bars. I feel like it needed some body roll help. And I think some of that could have been a contributing factor. But I experienced a sensation in driving Bigfoot 10, for example, that I didn't have in 14. 14 had bigger, stronger sway bars on it by the time I drove it than what number 10 had. Number 10 honestly just had some pretty wore out old small sway bars in it, and that thing would just lean in the turns. And when Kramer was kind of, you know, teaching me along, helping me get my feet under me as a driver, he was pointing out to me that I was putting a lot of steering input corrections in that didn't need to be. And he pointed out to me, I think you're feeling the truck lean a little bit, and you're kind of thinking like, I need to steer into that a little bit. You know, you're just instinctively throwing some steering input in when maybe you really didn't need to, and you kind of need to let the truck just wiggle itself, you know, get its wiggles out, so to speak. And I wonder if because 8 was so different than 4 and everything he had driven up to that point, and I don't know this for a fact. I'm just wondering if maybe Andy was overcorrecting or just flat correcting sometimes when he didn't need to correct. And of course, in any kind of a monster truck, you start putting in corrections that aren't really corrections, and then you start making the mistake grow, and that can be a problem. But I also thought, Matt, and forgive me if you were, you know, breaking up on my end a little and I missed some of this, and you had already said it. But I also think these longer tracks that had the longer crush car sets for the first jump, Bigfoot 8 seemed to struggle if it had to land on cars, especially if only the rear of the truck landed on cars. If he could clear the first set of cars, I think Stafford, he had some luck in like the right lane closer to the crowd. There's a couple times Andy had luck just clearing that set, and if he could bring it right back down the other side and settle down and get in the gas, he was off to the races. But if the rear of the truck, and I think Flemington was probably a pretty good example of that, when the rear of the truck would, you know, cash into the cars, it would really upset the truck's handling in kind of unpredictable ways. Is that kind of what you were seeing as well?
Yeah. I didn't allude to exactly that, so I'm glad you kind of put it that way. You know, Bigfoot 8 absorbed the bumps real well. I guess you could say landed real well. But if it was an off camber hit, like the crush cars landing in the rear tires, like only the rear tires, it really threw the truck off when they were trying to go straight with it immediately after to line up for the second set. You could tell just that Andy Brass struggled a lot on those outdoor tracks whenever anything wasn't exactly right.
That truck was a diva at first, man. I mean, it had a pretty specific type of race that it wanted to excel on, and then it definitely, you know, struggled on some different stuff. And again, like I say, I am sure there was I've never raced a left-hand drive monster truck. I have driven Bigfoot 8. I have driven over cars with Bigfoot 8. I've never raced with Bigfoot 8. But it is certainly a little bit of a different feeling in a nitrogen shock, sway bar equipped truck sitting on the left-hand side versus like, you just feel more like balanced and like you don't move around as much when you're in a center seat truck is kind of how I would describe it. So I'm sure there was some, seat of the pants, feel it in your ass type stuff that, he had to overcome. It's kind of a shame that he apparently had so much success at non-TV shows, and that we weren't able to see a lot of that because after Stafford Springs, Equalizer, has had the gap shrunk a little bit by Bigfoot and leaves Stafford Springs with 644 points to Bigfoot's 623, and then Gary Porter and Carolina Crusher at a distant 574. And so then we roll into, gosh dang it, I lost my spot here. Of course, we have a couple non-TV shows, Hagerstown, Maryland, for example. Bigfoot 8 races there. And I'm not saying there wasn't other races too. They're not in my archives, but Hagerstown, Maryland, non-points, Brass is there for 2 nights with Bigfoot 8. And then the curious Toronto, Ontario, I think it was called the CE Stadium or the Expo Stadium in Toronto, a one-night only show there, and there were some pretty interesting trucks there. They were not typically part of the TNT Points Tour, and I don't know if that had something to do with like border crossing issues or anything like that. Yeah, and so after Toronto, man, Bigfoot 8 does not make... Bigfoot 8 doesn't even do another show. I take that back. It does pop out to Roseburg, Oregon for another Zizek show. And then it's haul ass all the way back from Roseburg, Oregon, just in time for the Freedom Hall TNT Points Finals. And Matt, we kind of know the story of what happened there, of course. On the Bigfoot side of things, Brass ran pretty much a perfect weekend. You could call it a grand slam of a weekend. The track was very suited, as you mentioned earlier. That track design was Bigfoot 8 was almost built for that design, and that design was built for Bigfoot 8. It kind of seemed like. So Brass had no problem doing his side of the chores for the weekend to make sure that he packed as many points on as he could. But, we did talk about Larry Birch and Birch's communication, and their pioneering work with, fixed in-truck RII systems. But back then they were swapping radios out, for the trucks between rounds and stuff. And the Equalizer team at one point suffered what they claimed was a kill box problem on the line, which certainly left them dead in the water. Whatever the problem was, it left them dead in the water. And Holbrook was most definitely insisting that there was a kill box problem. Speller, Mike Speller, I kept wanting to say Keith. Mike Speller, for TNT, is insinuating and insisting there's nothing wrong with the killer box, put it in the truck, all the test lights and the check, everything went good. So I kind of hate to see such a controversial year not just end with some straight up knockdown, drag out, Bigfoot squeaks past Equalizer type shit to really wrap that championship up, Matt. But instead we had kill radio drama, which might be one of the oldest stories in monster truck racing at this point.
That's right. You say one of the oldest stories. Now it's the RII working effectively because tech officials shut the trucks off during freestyle, or in Tom Mintz's case, the one race where they had to rerun it. But yeah, it was kind of a disappointing ending to that season. Like you said, Bigfoot was running flawlessly. Equalizer, not really the underdog, but definitely not the truck out of those two that needed to have those problems with the RII. And, you pretty much said it all right there. It was an event that was suited to Bigfoot. His competition for the championship was having the issues with the RII, so rest is history, I guess.
I found it pretty compelling, the drama that was unfolding the next time that Equalizer had mechanical issues, and it might have been in the air over the cars on a pass. I can't remember if it was night 1 or night 2. But initially, on interview, Holbrook is insisting, he killed me in the air again. He killed me with Speller, killed me with the radio in the air again. But Gary Cook is quick to say, no, it wasn't the radio this time. It was something else. And then they're back in the pits changing fuel pumps on the truck because they found they had a bad fuel pump, I think. Is that right? It was a bad fuel pump, I think. But they're back there changing hard parts on the truck. And Holbrook is still insisting, yeah, but he still killed me. And Gary Cook's like, no, that ain't what happened. Like, so there's already, I'm starting to see a pattern with Gary Cook here that behind the scenes there could be a common thread where there's disagreements with drivers on different things. And of course, all of us when we were 18 or 19, we knew it all and we loved to argue and we were right and the old man was wrong and they shut me off in the air. But just layers of drama and things like that. But unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but I mean, by then, SRO Pace, that group had, secured the details, at least, I guess, or the whatever, the agreement, it was in place for TNT to be purchased, to be bought out, by SRO. So it's kind of, Bigfoot had a lawsuit going and, this guy with his trucks whining all the time. And this guy's got he's been whining all year, but now he's got his new truck here and it's running pretty good. And just it just felt like a crappy way to end the whole deal. You kind of wish that everything kind of would have gotten cleaned up, earlier in the year during the summer or something. And that it could have ended in a more proper battle royale. And I don't think Bigfoot 8's championship is tainted in any way from 1990 as far as did the truck really deserve it or not, or did it just come out and beat up on, heavy, slow, old stage 2 trucks? Well, I don't think that was entirely the case. I think Bigfoot dished out its share of wins, but it took its share of blows too. I mean, if you sit down and just watch the TNT shows chronologically, like I did recently, not all in one setting, by the way, my wife would have fired me for that. But I definitely think it feels kind of down if you're a Bigfoot fan through that middle section of the year where 4's running like shit and getting beat and then 8's handling like shit and getting beat. It doesn't feel like Bigfoot is headed towards any kind of championship, honestly. It really doesn't. And I think some of what pushed it over the edge, Matt, was whatever success that they had in Hagerstown and Toronto, not at those TV shows, gave them a pretty significant boost in points they needed to pull close enough to Equalizer heading into Freedom Hall to then capitalize, I think, on the bad weekend that Equalizer had,
Yeah, I think that's a real good point. And as, younger, kids at the time, obviously not being able to watch those televised series, it's really not something that you had an appreciation for until later on, like now where we're getting to see those results that we didn't necessarily know about then, except for just a quick blurb of what points the trucks had going into the next event, like in Louisville at Freedom Hall.
Talking to some of my former, Bigfoot compatriots like Jim Kramer earlier today and Gene Patterson and I were exchanging some messages and stuff like that. And, those guys were both pretty thick in their driving careers, running their own Bigfoot trucks around the time a lot of this drama with number 8 was happening. So they didn't have a ton of recollection of it, and I'm sure they probably weren't looped in on lawsuit stuff or anything like that they didn't need to be. Bigfoot had its own counsel and legal team handling that stuff. And you probably don't want a bunch of guys out on the road, saying stuff on behalf of their team that's in the lawsuit. So it's better everybody just mind your own business and don't talk about it. We'll handle it with the lawyers. So, even Jim really didn't have a lot to share on that as far as really remembering much of anything. He was in the throes of building and helping build and then running Bigfoot 9, of course, that year. And, but Gene offered me a little bit of insight too. And I said, well, Gene, do you think it was this guy behind the scenes, trying to get things fired up against Bigfoot more? Or was it the guy that was speaking the loudest on the TV? Or, was it the guy running the closest to Bigfoot in the points? And, we all kind of just decided, based on, people's experiences and what we've learned and everything like that, there was definitely some kind of concerted effort among some of the top team owners or drivers to really want Bigfoot 8 out of that series permanently, if not just at least for a period of time like it ended up being. That article I read earlier seemed pretty set in the wool by TNT. Like, this truck's done for the year. We'll review it at the end of the year. We'll see if we'll let it compete in 1991. I mean, what kind of horseshit would that be? Saying, nope, we're still not letting Bigfoot 8 compete in 1991. Talk about setting the sport back. But I don't know if it was the lawsuit or giving up the impending sale and just not caring anymore, and I'm only just asking questions and speculating. I really don't know, but something made them change their mind to bring that truck back in and let it finish off its rightful course, and do its thing and win a well-deserved title. Pretty crazy to think that by 1990, we had already had two previous pretty legitimate world champions in the form of USA 1 and Equalizer, and Bigfoot did not yet have a championship to its name. I mean, Jim Kramer went his whole career without a true points championship to his name, which is kind of a crazy, factoid while we're talking about this stuff. So whatever let the truck back in, there was a lot of opposition to it, from behind the scenes and in front of the cameras. It would not surprise me if there was a white Chevrolet truck that rolled over a lot, whose owner might have had something to do with not wanting Bigfoot 8 on the track and having some opinions maybe behind the scenes and not so much on camera. Obviously, Scott Stevens was super vocal. Gary Porter was super vocal. And at the end of the day, those guys end up going on to build really successful and really nice and competitive tube chassis trucks of their own. TNT goes away. In all reality, it goes away in Louisville at Freedom Hall in 1990. There were some events under U.S. Hot Rod management, let's say, in 1991 that somewhat confusingly had TNT and some Redman signage and banners and even some naming on them. But really, it all died. The music of this sort of playlist finished up at Freedom Hall. So I guess to summarize, Matt, and I want to throw it back to you here in a second for kind of your final thoughts, but where I've kind of arrived at on this is ultimately this whole case is not as simple as maybe it once seemed to us as fans or even as industry professionals. I mean, I sat for hours of my life, days on end, babysitting Bigfoot 8 in my early days at Bigfoot when I was just a utility guy and they need me to cover displays for 6 weeks. Cool. I'll take Bigfoot 8 for 6 weeks. I've sat in the shade of Bigfoot 8 and literally like surfed internet monster truck things on my phone or my laptop, right? Like I've been immersed in the history of Bigfoot 8 and then not even maybe appreciated it as much as I should have. I even did a display in Stafford Springs, Connecticut with Bigfoot 8 once, which is pretty funny. And so what used to seem so simple, Bigfoot 8 won everything. It got banned for a while. They let it come back and then it finished winning everything. That's ultimately what I believe and have discovered to not be true. And that there was so many more layers, to this than what really meets the eye. And that the TV shows, unsurprisingly, don't always paint as fair or as clear or as truthful of a picture as maybe what was actually happening out there. So my final ruling is on it. I think non-Bigfoot team and truck owners and drivers had every right to be concerned about Bigfoot 8 and to maybe not want Bigfoot 8 in the series or anything like that. But I think perhaps cooler heads could have prevailed sooner and helped everyone understand that most of you monster truck teams that are running TNT probably can't afford to just quit running the series and go pick up shows elsewhere because you would be losing, exposure on TV and income and notoriety and all those things. But also at the end of the day, having Bigfoot 8 at those shows was ultimately what would have been best for those shows as far as giving the people in the stands the things they really want to see. Not for the first time. What was happening with the monster trucks meant more to the people in monster trucks than it probably actually meant, to the people out in the stands or even watching at home on TV. So I understand the complaints and the concerns. I still think my final ruling is they should not have banned Bigfoot 8. But that's just my thoughts. So where do you kind of stand on it after all of this, Matt?
Well, I think a point that I don't know was made yet. Bigfoot 8 drove a lot of other teams to build more competitive trucks. Dennis, Gary Porter, they both had trucks come out at the end of 90 and the beginning of 91 that very similarly copied Bigfoot 8. Micro Machines coming out, which wasn't a copy of Bigfoot 8, but it was not a stage 2 monster truck, let's say. Having a technologically advanced vehicle out there for everyone to compete with really makes the guys that are going to carry the sport into the next age, it makes them step up. It doesn't make them just go home and with their tail tucked between their legs. And I think looking at it more kind of with a balanced perspective instead of just how Tough Tracks brought it to you, you see that Bigfoot really wasn't dominating every time it went to the line. And I don't think it should have been banned either. I think it was good for the sport overall, even though, you know, nothing against the guy personally, but like Everett Jasmer did not move with the times. He complained about Bigfoot and did not build a competitive truck. And in the one TNT special episode that they had on USA 1, he even kind of chides himself for not building a newer truck. Instead of, he spent his time fighting the system, as he said, instead of spending his time building a more competitive truck.
Today, Jasper and Chandler respect one another, but disagree on several fronts, particularly on Bigfoot's high-tech advances in the sport. Here's Bob Chandler.
Everett and I are a lot alike in fact, the mechanical things of building trucks. He can build a dynamite truck. I can build a dynamite truck, I think. That's probably where our ideas, our parallel ideas change, because from that point, he likes drag racing. I like a variety of events. I think my truck can do the drag racing. I think it can do obstacles. I know it can do any other type of event that the trucks have done over the years. Everett is really pushed for straight line drag racing only.
I feel that I can build any kind of truck I want, but I don't think I'm going to have anybody to race with if I go out and build a truck that nobody can race with, because even those that'll keep trying, eventually they're going to burn out. They're going to either go broke because they can't win, or they're just going to lose the drive.
So Jasmer believes that Bigfoot may ruin the sport if its high-tech trucks continue to get faster and faster. Is this just sour grape, or is it Jasmer's competitive nature? Or is Bigfoot upset about getting whipped by USA 1 in 1988? Here's Chandler.
Everett's very competitive. In fact, he and I are both very competitive. TNT had a rule set up 6 months ago that required everybody to drop down in size of cubic inch motors to a 500 cubic inch. That was their maximum size, starting about a month ago. We're supposed to have that size limit. Everett Jasmer runs a 572 cubic inch motor and has 5 backups. About a week before the rule went into effect, Everett convinced TNT to change the rule to fit Everett. Now, there's a lot of guys out there that have changed the motors and spent a lot of money, including me, to downsize the engine to be competitive. And all of a sudden the rule got changed. I think it's unfair.
Jasmer's reputation for fighting for what he says is the good of the sport obviously has set USA 1 back. He shoulders the blame for 1989. He could have been racing a new truck, competitive with Bigfoot, instead of spending time fighting the system.
Sometimes I wonder about that myself. I lose a lot of ground fighting. Sometimes I say to myself, I should just quit fighting and go out and look out for number 1 and forget about it. Something inside of me keeps preventing me from doing that. And I really sincerely believe that down the road it's going to pay off. But yes, I've proved it. I've just wasted 9-10 months of my life fighting. And I could have had a new truck done last year and been racing it. I could have had another new truck done this year. But I've been fighting the system. I don't know why that is. It's something, even when I tell myself not to, I end up doing it anyway.
And maybe that was part of the downfall of that organization. Either way, I think having a Bigfoot 8 is a good thing, was a good thing for that series. And I agree with you. I don't think it should have been banned. I think they should have found, I don't know. like I said, I'm kind of torn between thinking just let it ride the way it was, or maybe find something that would have allowed everyone else to be competitive with it, like limiting power to the truck. I don't know. If I had to give an answer right now, I would say they shouldn't have banned it and just let it run as it is.
I mean, you could have done a number of things. You could take power away. You could change the fueling source from methanol to gas or whatever. You could make them add ballast. I mean, there was definitely things they could have done to establish what they felt was a more competitive balance of power, BOP. If you're like a sports car racing fan or anything, you understand BOP. Something like that could have been done. Your point about Everett is great, and it's not really throwing shade. I would hope he probably wouldn't even disagree today with that sentiment. I told Jim, I said, man, if I was racing, because we were, talking like TNT or other people making references to if Bigfoot 8 was safe or not. Strap yourself into Bigfoot 8, strap yourself into USA 1, the 1988 truck, pick one. But if I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to do 60 miles an hour down through no man's land, hit a ramp of cars, and then you're going to wad it up when you land. There's nothing you can do. This truck is going to crash when it lands. Do you want to be inside of Bigfoot 8 for that 60 mile an hour crash off a jump of cars, or do you want to be in USA 1? Okay. And so the difference between a cracked out stage 1 truck versus a state-of-the-art, much safer, easier on the driver stage 3 truck, and those things are racing each other at 60 mile an hour in 1990, and tell me which truck rolled more in 1990 and rolled more violently in 1990. Sneak peek of the answer here. Hint, it's not Bigfoot. So, the safety argument, of course, that part of it's directly out of the window, and as far as I'm concerned. There was a kind of a saying, I'm going to paraphrase it from the golden years of like stock car racing. And it went something like, if they're not making rules because of you, you're not innovating hard enough, essentially. What, the Bigfoot team, and here's a name we haven't said yet, and screw me for not saying it yet, Dan Patrick. We've talked about Jim Kramer and Bob Chandler and Andy Brass's input on Bigfoot 8, but holy cow, if you're Dan Patrick or a member of his family or a member of his team or a fan of Dan Patrick, I hope you've made it this far. We have not mentioned Dan Patrick in his constructive and creative hand in the creation of Bigfoot 8 nearly enough, which is to say we haven't even mentioned it yet on this show. But there really arguably would have been no Bigfoot 8 in the way there became a Bigfoot 8 had it not been for Dan Patrick, of course, and the work and the time and the heartache and the headache and sweat he put in to that truck. And where Chandler was so much of a conceptual mastermind with the CAD drawings and the computer and forward thinking, I think Patrick, and then certainly Andy and Kramer as well, sort of took that and then blended it with more practical real world thinking at times. And, I'm sure there was days it was easier than others and days it was harder than others, but they somehow found a way to meet in the middle enough times to give us Bigfoot 8. So sorry for that. We should have mentioned Patrick a hell of a lot. We're both huge Dan Patrick fans, so it's kind of stupid that I didn't mention that yet, Matt. Damn it.
Yeah, it happens. We covered a lot.
It happens. So, we've covered some ground today. We've covered plenty of ground, I think, for one night. So hopefully we've made our case for a better understanding, at least some giving fans out there, all of y'all reason to maybe re-examine a little bit some of the drama that happened with Bigfoot 8 in the 1990 season. So with that having been said, shout out to everybody out there that's been sticking with us. We know, like I said, every episode, sometimes these things run long, but we don't really care. We're here to be watched and hopefully entertain you when time permits. Special shout out, Matt, to all the monster truck friends and teams and guys working in the shop and stuff that don't always get to watch us, but they've got their TVs or their sound bar or their speakers blasting in the shop and they listen to some of the dumb stuff we say. But we love hearing from you. Keep writing to us. It's very motivating and makes us want to keep, putting the effort into shows like this when we hear you guys are listening to us in the shop or going down the road or working out of the holler. So, we thank all of y'all, certainly. And Matt, unless you've got anything else, man, I think that's pretty much a wrap on Season 2, Episode 3.
Yeah, long one, but hopefully everyone enjoyed it. Almost got the autism flowing a little bit, I think, with the focusing in on one racing series for 1 year. But it's good.
I took extra Tylenol.
It was good. Always a good time.
In the history of monster trucks. No, I'm sorry. It's this damn delay. I was just going to say, in the history of monster trucks, the only thing that matters less now about why Bigfoot 8 got banned is the amount of time you and I spent talking about it, however many years later. But want to thank everybody once again for tuning in. Bottom dead center, we're going to call it a night here, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be looking for a new OSMT medium raw coming up next week. Hint, hint, it might be from Tampa. And then we'll be back to you probably later this month with some more Bottom Dead Center. So on behalf of Matt Looker, the as yet to appear in this season, but will be back eventually, Frank Grimmel, Iceman, Cody Saucier, and myself, Kyle Doyle. Thanks for tuning in to Bottom Dead Center. We'll see you next time.